across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive, and we have a packed and fascinating show for you today. Two-tier justice is alive and well in this country. The Justice Secretary seems powerless to do anything about it, but she says she might legislate because why? The Sentencing Council, an unelected group of senior judicial figures, have decided that your ethnicity, your sexuality, aspects of your character should at least be included in the pre-sentencing report, which the outcome of which may determine your sentence. So if you're trans, if you're from an ethnic minority, if you're someone who has some sort of protected characteristic, well, you might get a lighter sentence. Yes, really, that is what the Sentencing Council wants to do. It's an unelected body set up in 2009, and today they have said, no, Justice Secretary, democratically elected government, you're wrong. We're going to do what we want. Shabnam Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, I'm on her side. Not often you see me completely defending a Labour Cabinet Minister. I'm going to do it today because she's right. She says she might legislate. We'll talk to a Conservative MP about this in a minute. Two-tier justice is something we were told didn't exist. Now we can see it quite literally in black and white. This is our main story today. I want your views on it as well. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about a quarter of Britons now disabled, 2 million more since the pandemic due to mental health, an earthquake in Myanmar, the sport as well, we'll talk about that, and the King now out of hospital after side effects after his cancer treatment. I want your views on all these topics, particularly the Sentencing Council and two-tier justice in this country. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Make sure you send me a voice note, 0344 499 1000. That's less than a minute. If you send it through, we'll get as many of those on the air as we can between now and 7. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on that number or give me a ring as well for a live discussion on the air. I can see the phone lines going already. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. So the Sentencing Council has released a statement today. This controversy has been going on for a while. We've been talking about it for a while. It is quite simply that in a pre-sentencing report, which a judge gets to determine what a sentence should be, we're talking about rapists, we're talking about murderers, we're talking about armed robbers, we're talking about shoplifters, we're talking about all sorts of people. The Sentencing Council, which is a group of senior ranking legal figures in this country, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, Lady Chief Justice Sue Carr, lots of them are all saying together, there's 14 or 15 of them, and they're saying that your ethnicity, your protected characteristics, whether you're gay, trans, whatever, that should actually be something that influences a judge, or at least the information is given to them in terms of what they should do with their sentence. I think that's absolute nonsense. Justice is meant to be blind. It is meant to be equal. It is meant to be something in this country that no matter who you are, no matter what background you are, if you're a rich banker, if you're someone who's on the dole, if you're someone who is a middle-class person who's never broken the law before, justice should be exactly the same for all three of you. Yes, there'll be mitigating factors. Yes, you'll say, well, there was motivation, there were problems, there were issues that can be brought before a judge. But something you can't control, your ethnicity, your sexuality, etc., that now the Sentencing Council should be brought in. This is woke nonsense. It is really, really worrying, and it is straightforwardly two-tier justice. That is what it is. The Sentencing Council, this arrogant bunch of 14 or 15 senior people, have defied Shabnam Mahmood, have defied the Justice Secretary. They have said the Sentencing Council has given very careful consideration to the Lord Chancellor's request, this is Shabnam Mahmood, the Justice Secretary's request, to amend or reconsider its recently published revised guideline imposition of community or custodial sentences. The Council has written to the Lord Chancellor to explain why we have decided not to make the requested changes. They're an unelected body saying to an elected politician that she is wrong and they are right. Lord Justice William Davies is the head of the Sentencing Council. It's overseen by Baroness Sue Carr, who's the Lady Chief Justice. I've read through this letter, It's a 5-page letter, and there are, I mean, we're through the looking glass here. As the imposition guidelines state, a pre-sentence report will inform the judge or magistrate of the nature and causes of the offender's behaviour, the offender's personal circumstances, and any factors that may be helpful to the court in considering the offender's suitability for different sentences or requirements. This will make them better informed about the offender, says Lord Justice William Davis, Chairman of the Sentencing Council, with his pretentious signature there. This is overseen by the Lady Chief Justice Sue Carr. She's the one who, in the Court of Appeal, reduced the sentences of some members of Just Stop Oil. She's the one who said to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, when they criticised a judge, that they were wrong to criticise a judge. I don't know about you, but last time I checked, there was freedom of speech in this country. Well, the Ministry of Justice has responded. And this is Shabna Mahmood, the Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, who I think is absolutely right on this. I have been clear, she says, in my view, that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. This is unacceptable, and I formally set out my objections to this in a letter to the Sentencing Council last week. I am extremely disappointed by the Council's response. All options are on the table, and I will legislate if necessary. It's not often I say this. It's not often I say this on this station. It's not often I say this about a Labour Cabinet Minister. Shabna Mahmood, you're 100% correct, and I fully back you. You're right, and I think you should legislate on this. This is what she said on the 5th of March. So she tweeted on the 5th of March.
Let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
OK, good stuff, Shabna. But you've got to make sure that you do what you say. You've got to make sure that you back this up. Previously, she said the Sentencing Council is entirely independent. The updated guidelines do not represent my views or the views of this government. I will be writing to the Sentencing Council to register my displeasure. She did that. Good for you. She also said, as someone who is from an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind. There will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. That is what she said a few weeks ago. Then she wrote to the Sentencing Council. Then the Sentencing Council denied her guidance, denied her request that they reconsider this. She has said, as I say, she's extremely disappointed. All options are on the table, and I will legislate if necessary. Shabna Mahmood, you've got to legislate. You've got to tell these people, you've got to tell the Sentencing Council they are wrong. Someone's race, someone's ethnicity, someone's background, someone's sexuality should be nothing to do with how they are sentenced for a crime. Justice must be blind. The Sentencing Council are 100% wrong. You, Labour Cabinet Minister, are 100% right. Not often I say that, but I'm saying it today. And I think a version of what I'm saying is probably, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's probably along the lines of what the Conservative MP Graham Stuart is about to say. Let's see what he thinks. He's a Conservative for Beverley and Holderness, former Minister. Graham, this is an outrage.
It is an outrage, Peter, but I'm more outraged than you are because you're giving Shabana Mahmood a free card here. We said that this was going to happen. She contradicted herself. She said it'll never be allowed to happen under a Labour government. So we brought forward proposals to legislate. She said, oh, no, leave it with me. But I can assure everyone, assure the nation, 100% that I'm on the side of fighting two-tier justice, and it will never happen under a Labour council. Guess what? It's about under a Labour government.
But wasn't she right, Graham, to at least... Wasn't she right?
She was when we raised it.
But wasn't she right? But wasn't she right to just say, actually, let's give this a go. Let's try to reason with these people on the Sentencing Council. Let's have a process where we actually talk to them and say, you're wrong, please change your mind. Now she's saying she will legislate. So I think she will bring forward the legislation you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I hope she does it very, very quickly, because we could have had it already put in place. And she's shown the powerlessness of another Secretary of State in this government. We've already lost the Transport Secretary. I mean, the comms person's just gone. Rachel Reeves ought to go. And now we've got a Justice Secretary who told us 100%, another one of these Labour promises, and now she's just trying to sound as annoyed as the rest of us.
Well,
she has presided over and allowed to happen the very two-tier justice which will be in force before she legislates, whereas we came forward with proposals to ensure that that couldn't happen. And those two things were not logically the same. I hear your point, Peter. I would surely she given a chance, but she should have been honest then. There is every chance of two-tier justice under this Labour government, because I will not act until I've exhausted every bit of effort with the Sentencing Council, who, by the way, are independent. So she kind of contradicted herself when she was speaking to Parliament. She sounded as if on the one hand she had the power as it stood to be able to change this, and on the other she said they were independent. Well, the only way, if they're independent, to ensure that they don't bring in something which is egregious and wrong for all the reasons which you and anyone else in the whole country, left or right, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, Reform, can see as an outrage, and she didn't stop it. So I think that's, but you're right, Peter, you're right. We do share her sentiments. It's just that we look to the person who has the overall responsibility for the justice system in this country to make sure that it doesn't come off the rails. And her turning around and saying, well, I wanted to talk to the rail drivers union first. I wanted to have a chat with the driver, but yeah, I'm sorry, it has now gone flying off the rails.
Okay.
The job of the Secretary of State is to keep the train on the rails, not sit around saying, oh, she's as upset as the rest of us if it comes off. And then she sits there and presides over it while it does exactly that. And that's why I think it's people are frustrated and they want a government that can do it. The only positive out of this, I would say, Peter, is it does show a situation which is not all about, all Labour's fault, is that somehow we have moved, haven't we, from the principle of an independent judiciary, which we must have. We don't want politicians like me making all the rules, deciding on, making the rules is one thing, but not making the decisions on individual cases and the like. And yet somehow we've moved to a kind of activist judiciary.
How have we got to this space? How have we got to this side, Graham? Because we're in a situation where some very senior people, who I would argue should know better, are saying that it's not just, some of the language of this letter, we're through the looking glass. Impermissible differential treatment, ethnic, cultural and faith minority groups as a specific cohort. Essentially saying at various points that a judge or magistrate required to sentence an offender must do all they can to avoid a difference in outcome based on ethnicity. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. They're also saying, for example, that it's just giving all the information, and saying that William Davis, the Lord Justice, William Davis, chairman of the Sentencing Council, saying in this 5-page letter, essentially saying, don't worry about it, it's just a bit more information. Well, it's not. It's essentially saying that because of your ethnicity, your sexuality, or other protected characteristics, that you should be sentenced in a different way. They're also saying that they believe that many judges don't understand the people that they are sentencing. Well, because they're not like them, because they're not from an ethnic minority, perhaps, because they're not disabled, because they're not gay. Well, actually, they may not be an armed robber, they may not be a rapist, they may not be a murderer, but it doesn't mean they can't pronounce justice on them and give them a sentence.
No, I entirely agree with you. You asked me how it happened. I think there's been a kind of the training and the kind of critical race theory has come in many ways, informing quite a lot of the training that goes on, diversity training, inclusion, the rest of it, until people are made to feel defensive, B, then they're subject to what is in a sense a form of propaganda, and they end up in a position where highly intelligent, highly senior people come out with stuff which you, me, and everyone else in the country goes, well, that's clearly wrong, that's clearly absurd. And yet, because they've been part of this culture that has developed over time, they're absolutely sure that they are morally right. They also seem to think that they have the moral right to, as you say, ignore the elected politicians who are sent there and have to hold the, and
it's not just one party either, Graham. It's used the opposition and the government saying the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the positive out of this. If this shows us just how arrogant and out of touch really quite eminent, intelligent and decent people have become because of a culture and a system that has allowed it and encouraged it, then we need action, don't we? Not only do we need to close this particular egregious and appalling and outrageous loophole, we need to look again at the training that goes on in government departments, the civil service, across the judiciary, that doesn't come before ministers, isn't approved by the democratically elected, and seems to have a life of its own. So if it's a wake-up call on things like the civil service, and I think we need a Civil Service Act, I don't want to see 33-year-old Labour Together staffers brought in through some exceptions process to be a director general of a major department, which is what Labour did. That's not right. But equally, having civil servants who think that they can defy democratically elected ministers trying to implement their manifesto is outrageous. So the civil service, the judiciary, there's quite a lot of our system that needs to be corrected, but in a thoughtful way. We don't need knee-jerk.
Okay.
We don't want to end up like Donald Trump, seemingly ignoring the rule of law and just bullying everyone into submission. But we do need to change things, and this case is so bad and so awful for all the reasons you've given. And Shabana Mahmood, though she's right in her sentiments, should hold her head in shame for not having acted more decisively and sooner.
Graham, thank you. That's Graham Stuart MP. He's a Conservative for Beverley and Holderness, former Minister as well. Thank you to him. What do you think of what Graham said there? What do you think of what I'm saying? Maybe you think I'm wrong. 0344 499 1000. Elizabeth on text says, I'm unlikely to commit a crime. Glad to hear that, Elizabeth. I'm unlikely to commit a crime, but if I do, can I identify as one of those categories to get a lesser sentence? Yes. Yes, Elizabeth. That is what is happening. It is straightforwardly two-tier justice. That is what the Sentencing Council have put forward in their guidance. It's complicated, it's difficult, but straightforwardly, yes. If you're from an ethnic minority, if you are trans or gay or from some other protected characteristic, yes, that information will be put forward to a judge, and the judge will be asked to consider that when they're giving you a sentence. Stuart in Perthshire says, I'm sorry, but I think you're completely wrong about Shabana Mahmood. She knew every step of the way what they were doing, and now she's just making the right noises when she lets it go through. Never trust any Labour politician. That said, I no longer trust any politician. They're all the same, Farage included, says Stuart. Well, thank you for that, Stuart. We'll see what happens with this. She says she's considering legislation. I think she has to legislate, and I'm willing to praise her, and I'm willing to let the Justice Secretary not off with this one, but I'm willing to praise her and say she's done the right thing. But very, very soon, and I mean within days, she's got to legislate on this. She's got to overturn the Sentencing Council's two-tier justice plan for this country. Let's hear from Dave in London. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Dave, what do you make of this?
Hi, Peter. I appreciate you're very animated about this, as are we all, but what you're going to legislate against, you either remove their memorandum of articles or whatever it is governs them, or you don't. You can't just legislate against one thing they've done. I mean,
you can, but there is a wider point, Dave. I mean, do you think the Sentencing Council should be abolished?
I think that, as David Starkey has said many times, everything that Tony Blair did needs to be repealed wholeheartedly, the whole lot.
In fairness, this one was Gordon Brown, but I take your sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, so, look, all this stuff about we've got elected politicians, they're not really. They're muppets and puppets. They don't really have any authority to do anything. Look at the police commission, is it? The OBR. You can go on and on and on. There's dozens of these things. And even Starmer has set up 10, 20 since he's been in power. They've outsourced government. Blair just outsourced it. He just said, well, we can't be bothered to do it. We'll just turn up and be internationalists and fly around the world and do what we want to do. But in the meantime, they didn't create departments. They created legal bodies that have the full autonomy to do whatever they want. So you can't legislate against this. You've either got to stand that council down, because what are you going to do? You're going to legislate when they come up with something in 6 months' time?
In theory, you can, Dave. I mean, in theory, you could do that, but I agree with you, and I agree with a lot of your sentiments, especially when it comes to the Sentencing Council. I wonder whether its purpose has been served. Maybe through this they've overreached, and maybe they're putting themselves in jeopardy as well. I wonder if Shabana Mahmood will abolish them. Very interesting call. Dave, thank you. And it just shows on this show, you don't have to entirely agree with me in any stretch of the imagination. What we always do in my shows, we always take as many calls as possible, and we disagree without being disagreeable. Tony says, we're witnessing the final days of a once great country. Vive la Revolution. Kate in Sittingbourne says, I voted for Brexit because I wanted to be able to vote for the people who run my country. Everyone must be equal before the law. Come on, government, get a grip and remember who's in charge here. Sort it out. Finally, before the break, Lorraine says on two-tier justice, sorry, but I really do not believe the Justice Secretary will do anything. She has already had time to act and she hasn't. Actions speak louder than words, and I fear that it is all another Labour cover-up. Well, in fairness, she is angry. She says that she's thinking about legislation, and Lorraine, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's give her a week or 10 days. Are you going to bring legislation forward, Shabana Mahmood, that destroys this absolutely disgraceful piece of guidance that is saying it doesn't matter what crime you've committed, if there is a factor that is something that you've been born with, that you have absolutely no control over, such as your ethnicity, such as your sexuality, well, that's going to influence you getting a shorter sentence. It's outrageous. It's wrong. We're going to keep talking about it in this programme. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about the French police officers saying, wait 1 hour and the Brits will pick you up. 24 hours on the frontier. A big Sun investigation. We're going to talk about that. And the migrant crisis exposing the ruinous cost of Britain's kindness. Charlie Downs is coming up in just a minute on that topic next here on Talk.
Your employer, whether it's the civil service or anyone else, does have a right to tell you where the job is to be carried out. I mean, I think the thing is, we need not to sort of define this in terms of everybody has to do the same thing. And the civil service is 500,000 people doing all sorts of jobs. There are some of those which cannot be done from home, clearly. There are some of those which might be better done from home or which might be better done in some kind of hybrid environment. But the fundamental basis should be the operational outcome. How is the job done best? Where is it done best? And how is it done most efficiently?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to thank Amy on Twitter, who just sent this to me a minute ago. I'd read this at the time, but I hadn't actually connected the dots. This is the woman who is, not Amy, but the woman who is the head of our justice system is, certainly from the judge's perspective, is Sue Carr, Baroness Sue Carr. And she is oversees the Sentencing Council on all of this. She's also reduced the sentences as a Court of Appeal judge for Just Stop Oil. She's also told Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer to sit down and shut up when they criticise a judge. Well, there's free speech in this country. She's also written or overseen the writing of a 352-page guide which says that judges should consider how migrants are maligned by the media when deciding cases. This is the Equal Treatment Bench book, stating that negative perceptions of migrants, refugees and people seeking asylum are fueled by parts of the press and some political debates, says Woke Sue. But critics say this interpretation of society is another step towards two-tier justice. Well, it is. The 352-page guide is published by the Judicial College, which is led by her, Sue Carr, Baroness Carr of Walton on the Hill. It seeks to aid the understanding of circumstances of those who appear in courts and tribunals. Western psychological concepts should not be universally applied to those seeking asylum from varying cultures. Do you know what? That 352-page book could just be put down to 3 words, which are really simple: enforce the law. Or 5 words: equal treatment before the law. I don't care what the media says. I don't care what anybody thinks of migrants, although we're going to talk about it in a second. I care what you think for the purposes of this programme, and I care what I think because of the debate we're having. But when it comes to justice, justice must be blind, and it is not. What we have seen, and what The Sun has done fantastic work over the past little while, talking about the migrant crisis, exposing the ruinous cost of Britain's kindness. It's also outlined an instance where, waved off by French cops, VIP packages for migrants who want extra legroom. And they've seen how gangs are flooding the UK with illegal migrants. Well, Charlie Downs has read all this. He has been making sure that he knows what is in this. It's a big investigation in The Sun, which I've read as well. Charlie is the content lead at the Centre for Migration Control, and it shows that French authorities enabled illegal migration. That is the charge against them after leaving a dangerously overcrowded boat of migrants in the Channel to be rescued by the UK's border force. Charlie, this is shocking, but also all too familiar.
Yes, well, Peter, let's not forget that we send the French £476 million over the next 3 years to supposedly deal with this issue. But, whether that's actually going to yield anything is yet to be seen, because, as you say, this investigation by The Sun suggests that French authorities have been telling those crossing in small boats that they just need to wait in the Channel for an hour and the British authorities will come and pick them up. Now, that's just, it's actually quite insulting, I think. If I was a member of the British government, I'd be insulted to hear that our French counterparts are speaking about this in this way. But I don't know about you, Peter, but this story is actually somewhat similar to the one you were discussing before this about the Sentencing Council, because it speaks to the way in which our institutions have been captured by an ideology that seems to prioritise the so-called rights of perpetrators and punish the victims of crimes. There has been a huge increase in the number of people crossing the Channel this year. There's been 6,000 so far in 2025, which is a 26% increase over this time last year. And this is to say nothing of the outcomes when those people arrive in our country, because by dint of being illegal migrants and us having no real infrastructure to track the activities of these people, we don't really know what they come here and do. Now, there's only one reason that you come across the Channel illegally, and that is because you don't want to be on the books, because it's perfectly straightforward to come to this country and to seek asylum and indeed to seek legal citizenship legally and at a relatively low cost. But there's only one reason that people would pay thousands of pounds to cross the Channel illegally, and that's because they want to engage in either they're being trafficked, and in those cases, those people are victims and should be taken care of and looked out for. But I would suggest that in the majority of cases, it's people who are coming here to enter the black market in this country, this ever-expanding black market that seems to be, going completely unpoliced. And this is the point, Pete. The point about this is there are so many pull factors when it comes to Britain that until those are addressed, I don't think we're going to see this problem rectified, whether that's the way in which illegal migrants are put up in fancy hotels, or the way they're given access to free healthcare and welfare and housing, or the way in which they're seemingly treated with kid gloves. I mean, this... in
such an unequal way. Just with the Sun's investigation, I mean, this vessel that they're talking about left to be rescued, set off from a beach near Calais, with more than 100 people packed aboard. Officials took around 24 migrants off the boat for safety reasons, but are said to have allowed around 80 to continue their journey. I mean, surely the role of the French, with their 476 million quid, is to stop these boats leaving in the first place, leaving their shores, leaving the safe country of France.
Well, one would think, and I think it really, we should really be thinking about our relationship with the French if they are going to continue to allow this kind of thing to go on, quite frankly, because if they're not going to, make good on the agreements we've made with them, well, why the heck are we sending hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to them? But as I say, the key point here is cutting this problem off at the source, because we can throw money at it. We've been throwing money at it for years, and it doesn't seem to be changing anything. If anything, as I said, the problem is getting worse. So really, we have to think about incentives. I think we have to deal with the black market that is emerging and growing, seemingly unchecked in this country: drugs, arms, people trafficking, and so on. That so many of these people get involved with when they cross the channel. And we also have to address the fact that there are already possibly millions of people living in this country illegally. Research from Pew Research Centre in 2017 suggested that there were as many as 1.2 million illegal migrants residing in the UK in 2017. So if we add to that the hundreds of thousands that have crossed the channel in the interceding years, we might be looking at something like 1.5 to 2 million illegal migrants residing in Britain.
And we need to know who's here, why they're here, and if they're legally here as well. Charlie, thank you. Charlie Downs is content lead at the Centre for Migration Control. Just in terms of the two-tier justice discussion that we're having as well, although it all sort of feeds in together, as Charlie correctly says, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stuart says the Sentencing Council needs to earn the right to be independent from the voting public, and they are proving they despise what the majority think. The Sentencing Council now needs to be disbanded. Let's see what Jeff in Cardiff thinks. Jeff, what do you make of this? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi there, Pete. What it was, really, even if there is legislature against this quangle situation, then surely the seed is already been sown in the minds of the judges.
You think they'll just keep on trying it? They'll just keep battering down the door, or trying to batter down the door?
What, the government, you mean?
Yeah, they'll want their way, won't they? They won't like being slighted. Well,
it doesn't make any difference. If as I just said, it's already been said by this scours, in the letter of the 352-page document you've made. So all the judges will make up their own mind and go with what
But if they legislate,
in my mind.
I know what you mean, Jeff, but if Labour legislates specifically against it, they've got to uphold the rule of law, don't they?
Well, yes. I mean, I also think that if they come over here illegally and then they cause there's something wrong, whether they cause a crime, whether they steal, rape, pillage, whatever they do, then the sentence should be harsher, because they're already illegal. Well,
I think a lot of people will agree with you, Jeff. Thanks for your call. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Tim in Suffolk says we need ownership of this decision. Let the council stand, but the Prime Minister must approve all changes. Interesting one there. Big questions, fundamental questions about the independence of our judiciary, about what the Sentencing Council should be allowed to do, about two-tier justice, about fairness as well, which goes to the heart of so many stories on this station, including that a quarter of Britons now say they're disabled. 2 million more people since the pandemic due to mental health. If some people are disabled, they can have money from my taxpayers' money. That's absolutely fine, no issue with that. But if people are swinging the lead, well then we need to deal with that. And if people can work, they should work. We'll talk to Chris Snowden in just a second about this. He's from the Institute of Economic Affairs. You're going to want to hear this. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a quarter of British people now say they are disabled. A quarter of the population. Now, there are many disabled people, of course, who make a huge contribution to our society, who work or contribute in other ways, but 2 million more people since the pandemic say they are disabled due to mental health. Dozens of Labour MPs at the same time have joined a rebellion over Rachel Reeves's plans to cut welfare. This is 9 who have confirmed they're going to vote against the proposals on welfare when they're put to a vote in the House of Commons, and a further 19 have gone public with their opposition to the plans. So let's talk to Christopher Snowden, who's head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Christopher, a quarter of people disabled, 2 million more people at the start of the pandemic saying they're struggling because of poor mental health. I have sympathy with anybody who is genuinely disabled, but a quarter of people in this country disabled, it seems like a very, very large number.
It's an extremely large number. Yeah, it's a real problem. Another 700,000 people registered disabled just in the last year. These figures obviously went up during COVID. Some people were talking about this being long COVID, may obviously have been a part of it. But as far as I know, there aren't any other countries, and every country suffered from COVID, that has seen anything like this phenomenon of massive and rapidly growing number of people out of the workforce, economically inactive, because they're disabled, with a preponderance towards mental health disabilities, which apparently means that they cannot work. I don't buy it, frankly. I think this is a product of a broken welfare system that is giving people perverse incentives and creating what is essentially a benefits trap. And we need to get out of it very quickly, because the amount of spending on disability benefits is already enormous, about £36 billion. It's expected to go up, even with these cuts, to £59 million in a few years by the end of the decade. And it's a double whammy. We're not just paying out the benefits, you're also not getting people in work, being productive and paying taxes themselves. We need to do something about this. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, and I'm not sure that the way Rachel Reeves has gone about it is necessarily right. I don't think we should be cutting benefits. I think we should be making it more difficult for people to claim the benefits in the first place, particularly if it's things like autism, ADHD, various mental health problems, which I'm not dismissing, but I am arguing that I think actually a lot of people could go to work with these issues.
Yeah, and I've said this a few times before on these programmes, but work has changed to such a huge degree over the past number of years. We're talking about the bad bits of lockdown. We're talking about the fact that it has had an effect apparently on many people's health, but also working from home is something that is so much more acceptable and done by so many people. Far more so than it has been previously, and there are disabled people who could do some work, and it comes into that idea of perverse incentives as well, when there are people who say, well, I don't want to work a bit more because that'll put my benefits at risk. Surely the system has to be changed so that it's always worth working and you're always better off if you're working rather than putting benefits at risk per se.
Of course, and that was meant to be the whole point of universal credit. It was meant to get rid of these cliff edges, which incentivise people to stay out of the labour market. It was supposed to allow people to take as many hours work as they wanted and it to always pay. And it hasn't worked, because in fact in the last years of the Conservative government they changed the system around a bit, and they made it not more difficult but less beneficial financially to claim short-term sickness, and much more beneficial to claim to be long-term sick. And the benefits of being long-term sick were a lot bigger than what you get for just being a job seeker, being unemployed. And so naturally people gravitated and, let's face it, in some cases started making up or exaggerating various mental health conditions, which are quite easy to falsify, very difficult to disprove. You can say you have good days, bad days. You can say you've got depression, anxiety. It's very difficult for a doctor to say otherwise, and the doctors don't have much of an incentive to turn you down. I think really that is at the heart of this problem, along with things like the Motability scam that's been exposed in recent weeks. The incentives are all wrong, and I'm afraid we're going to have to be tough about this, because we just can't afford it as a society. We've got now 9.3 million people between the ages of 16 and 65 who are economically inactive, and that doesn't even include the 1.5 million people who are unemployed and supposedly looking for work.
the people I feel sorry for in all of this, Christopher, are the people who are genuinely disabled, who genuinely can't work, who are being given support, and they would argue, I would imagine, maybe the right support, maybe not enough support, who genuinely are genuine claimants who I'm happy to support. But there's so many people who are being lumped in with them, and some people who are being told you're disabled. A system, an institutional idea, you are disabled, you can't work, when actually it should be more positive. It should be you can work if you can. I wonder politically whether you think Labour has the stomach for this fight to actually deal with this, because there's Rachel Reeves at the Spring Statement 2 days ago says she wants to reduce the benefits bill. But as you say, the bill is the issue, but it's only part of the issue. The real issue is the number of people, not necessarily the amount of money being given to the genuine claimants.
Yes, and I think she'll be hoping that by making some cuts, she will get some people off disability benefits and into work, and I dare say that will happen. You've got to remember, we went through this 10 years ago or more under George Osborne. You remember Atos, I think it was, the agency, and we had all this kick and scream about, the Tories being brutal towards disabled people. In actual fact, they got quite a lot of people off disability benefit and into work. You are quite right to say that the sticky problem here is people who are generally disabled, and indeed their carers whose benefits are being cut by Rachel Reeves. That's always a problem with reform in this area. You want to be very sensitive around people who genuinely can't work and will never be able to work again for the rest of their lives, who are very sick and disabled, and the people around them, while at the same time getting some of the softer cases back into work. That might require a certain amount of assistance and obviously a certain amount of sympathy. I'm not claiming by any means that all these people are malingering, but it's a matter of helping out the people who genuinely deserve it, while at the same time cracking down on people who actually are malingering, or at least could do with a bit of a kick to get themselves into the workforce. And in fact, they might find that their anxiety and depression get a lot better when they do.
Well, I mean, I've said this before. I have anxiety and depression on a mild level. Being in work helps me. Helps me talk to people, feel better about myself, push through and try to work as much as possible, and I don't think I've had a day off with it for over a year anyway. Chris Snowden, thank you, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Maybe you want to respond to what he has said. 0344 499 1000. This two-tier justice thing is really something you want to talk about. It's something I want to talk about as well. This is, just if you're just tuning in, this is the Sentencing Council, a group of senior judges and other people in the justice system, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, for example, the job Keir Starmer used to do, saying that your ethnicity or protected characteristics should be taken into account when you're being sentenced for a crime. The Justice Secretary said no, they shouldn't do that. She might legislate to overrule them. They say, we don't care, we're doing what we want. Steve in the Midlands says, great show, Peter. I am a sitting magistrate and I love serving my community. However, I've never been closer to resigning. These guidelines force me to dishonour my oath to treat all without fear or favour. It's disgraceful and puts me and colleagues at risk of being seen as biased in our rules. Steve, very, very interesting perspective there. Agree with it, and I think that you do need to think very carefully about this. And good people like Steve, who are clearly magistrates who think very, very carefully about sentences, those are the kind of people I want in our justice system. Those are the kind of fair-minded, reasonable people I want passing sentence as a magistrate for crimes or higher up the chain as well, in high courts, crown courts and so on. Those are the kind of people that need to be in our system. And if Steve is saying he's about to leave, he won't be the only one, let me tell you. Paul Kirk in Milton Keynes says, we must not forget that this group of judges and barristers was in operation under the Tory governments. Both Labour and the Conservatives are responsible for where we are today concerning the judiciary. Well, lots more to discuss on that. We're also going to go live to Bangkok because hundreds are feared dead in Myanmar, what used to be known as Burma. The quake, enormous damage across the region there. We'll get a quick update there, then we'll take more of your calls and make sure you get your call in 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
British people, Australian people. The staff have said this is the first earthquake, the first big earthquake they've ever had. Apparently there was one 20 years ago, but they're still searching for some people who were staying in the hotel. Someone over there is missing his brother at the moment, so they're trying to work out who's here, who's not here. We don't know if we're going to be allowed back in the hotel anytime soon. And also, no news on planes coming in or leaving Bangkok.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I expect you've heard there was a 7.7 magnitude quake in Burma, and of course the huge effect of that has been felt in Bangkok. That is where we're going now to talk to Tommy Walker. He's a journalist there. Tommy, I understand you're beside a collapsed building and 81 people are still missing. Just give us the latest.
Actually, well, that number is significantly increased now. There's at least over 100 people still missing. As you can see behind me, the rescuers are trying desperately to get under this rubble to find out who's missing. So it's an ongoing story. It's a tragedy for Bangkok, and we're just waiting all night really to see what develops and see who can be taken away from this rubble.
Just talk us through what has happened over the last few hours.
Well, I mean, beginning from the earthquake itself was such a shock. You know, it happened, early this afternoon, local time. Buildings downtown were rattled, windows were smashed, people were swaying, including myself, in high-rise buildings. People evacuated, people were worried, tourists included. People were cancelling their trips, cancelling their hotel reservations, trying to get refunds, and some of them trying to leave Bangkok. Obviously, the biggest impact these tremors have had from Myanmar has happened here in the Bang Sue district near Chatuchak. So this is the biggest impact it's had, this earthquake. The building collapsed, and now it's just a rescue effort. And, authorities, the government's announced that Bangkok's in a state of emergency, and it's doing all it can to find out what it can do to find these missing people. And it's a long operation and such a tragic day, really.
Thank you for that update. That's Tommy Walker, who's a journalist in Bangkok, telling us about what has been happening there. 7.7 on the Richter scale, and as he says, over 100 people. Search and rescue operation was underway. Now it's really just rescue at this stage, unfortunately. And those dramatic images, if you're watching on the screen, you can see them. But certainly, rubble everywhere. If you're listening to the radio, rubble everywhere. A rooftop pool spilling over the sides of a swaying building, and it is just a very, very difficult situation there for everyone who is there. So thank you to Tommy for that update. Lots of people getting in touch about two-tier justice in this country. Kenny in Edinburgh says his time Keir Starmer stopped acting tough and actually got tough with the tiny little President Macron. We have paid this man $500 million to stop the boats, but not only are they not doing this, but now we hear the French Navy are actually telling them we will come and get them if a French ship gets close enough to be heard by a migrant's boat. Why isn't that ship stopping them? Macron needs to answer this. Mark says, afternoon Peter, what will it do to end this nonsense? What do you think needs to happen to end the decisions whereby the courts allow people to stay and peddle the narrative they are the victims in a crime they actually committed? We see assaults, financial crime, drug dealing, it never ends. Carl in Derbyshire, it's obvious Keir Starmer doesn't give a damn about the migrant situation. He's probably spent as much time in Paris as he has in London, yet he's not broached the issue with his big buddy Macron, says Carl in Derbyshire. Leslie says all of this two-tier justice stuff is down to Blair when he ceded parliamentary sovereignty to the lawyers and judges. It was actually Gordon Brown who brought in the sentencing council. But yeah, Leslie, I think a lot of people would make a similar point. Let's see if Jeff in Bedford is one of them. Jeff, tell us what you think about two-tier justice in this country. You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Pete. Damage is already done, I'm afraid, because it doesn't matter what Miss Mahmood says now. The judges have heard what they've been instructed to do, and they'll do it regardless of what she does now. The judges are all friends of the Sentencing Commission. They're all in the same ilk, if you like. So it's like if you go to court and you're on the jury, and the judge tells you to disregard something that somebody's said, you've heard it.
Yeah,
you've heard
it's in your mind somewhere. Although we did hear, Jeff, we did hear from Steve earlier on. He texted and he says he's a magistrate and he's thinking of actually leaving the, it's a voluntary position to be a magistrate, I think, most of the time anyway. And he's thinking of leaving it because he says this is all nonsense. Yeah,
he's a magistrate, and he's one of. We're not talking magistrates now, are we?
You're talking people further up the chain.
We're talking about the big wigs. You know what I mean? We're talking about the crown.
Yeah,
and
quite literally the people who wear the big wigs.
Yeah, and like I say, the Sentencing Commission, they're all the same. So the fact that it's been said, it will get done, and it doesn't matter what Ms. Mahmood says now. It's too late. It's out there, and they will follow it, even though they're instructed not to.
Well,
they don't want to make the Sentencing Commission look silly because they've had to back down, because it's going to make them look silly because they're our mates.
Jeff, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Jeff in Bedford. We'll see what happens. We'll see if this legislation comes forward. As I said, maybe because I'm a relentless optimist, maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm willing to give Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, the benefit of the doubt. I want to see her bring forward this legislation very soon, and I'm talking like a week or 10 days. I want her to bring it forward to say we are going to undo what the Sentencing Commission has done here. Let's see what John in West Lothian thinks of this. John, you're very welcome to Drive. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
Yes, this Sentencing Council, I mean, this will be a real test case for the Prime Minister, as being the ex-leader of the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yes.
Will he back his minister? Because, you know, this is one of those things which there is only one decision that I think can be made, and that is disband them altogether.
Well, he has said so far, in fairness to Keir Starmer, he said he's backing his Justice Secretary on this, but it'll be interesting to see if they go as far as to legislate. And you're talking about even disbanding the whole institution, the Sentencing Council. Do you think that would be a way forward?
Yes, because as I think somebody said earlier, it will only reoccur again. They have actually got to make a serious stand on this and stand up for the majority of British people, and not get into this situation where there is this two-tier system for the law. We're all supposed to be the same under the law.
Exactly.
So why should one quango backed up by woke judges be allowed to go against the majority of the country?
I can't disagree with a single word of that, John. How do you think we've got to this place?
I think that there has been a steady wokeness from the Labour Party since they got in, but I also think the Conservatives could have been much stronger in the past as well.
But Labour are against this, John. They've said at every level that they're against this.
Yes, but everything else that they've done is against the people of this country who have standards and beliefs for generations.
Well, they voted for Labour. I mean, Labour are the democratically elected government of this country.
Oh yes, that's the system. I agree with that. But look at the percentage. Look at the people that didn't vote for them. The vast majority did not vote for them.
But that's always been the case with every government since the war, John. They've never got an absolute majority.
No, but they have told so many lies to the public in their manifesto, and they've not lived up to any of them. They've changed absolutely everything that they've done.
Okay. John, thanks for your thoughts. That's John in West Lothian there. If you want to get your voice on the air, like John, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Gary's been in touch. He says, "Hi Peter, why work and pay taxes to fund immigrants in 4-star hotels?" I think a lot of people think that. A lot of people will say, "I'm at work today. I'm paying. I'm getting some money and paying my taxes. I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. And actually, what's the point? What is the point? Why am I bothering? We're being taxed at the highest level since the Second World War. Actually, a lot of money going to things, a lot of things we disagree with, including people who've made absolutely no contribution to this country whatsoever, stuck in hotels, three meals a day, liberty to do what they want. Okay, they're being processed and that processing system isn't working well, but at the same time, that's the local hotel that maybe a lot of people couldn't afford to go to, or maybe go to once a year for Mother's Day or something like that. Mark says, on two-tier justice, Robert Jenrick tried to put legislation in place a few weeks back, which Labour rejected. That is correct. Shabnam Mahmood had enough time to overturn this, but chose to drag her feet. This will now drag on for months, as I believe it was Labour's intention to do this all along, says Mark from London. Mark, I don't think it's Labour's intention to do it. If it was their intention to do it, they'd just let it happen. And yes, she could have backed Robert Jenrick's bill, but what Shabnam Mahmood was doing, it's not like me to do this, but I'm going to defend her, I'm going to defend a Labour Cabinet Minister. What she wanted to do was to just exhaust the options, have a chat with the Sentencing Council, try to reason with them. What they have shown, in my strongly held personal belief, is that they cannot be reasoned with. They're going ahead with this absolute nonsense. Shabnam Mahmood is now going to have to legislate against it. I hope that she does it. Paul says, what is the incentive for these judges to introduce two-tier sentencing? What do they want to achieve, says Paul. Well, Paul, what I think they want to achieve is two-tier justice. I think that's what they want to achieve. They want to try to change the justice system so it's not on what crime you've committed. It's about things that are out of your control, like your ethnicity, like your sexuality. Those are the things that they want to be in the minds of judges when they are forming an opinion. We're going to talk more about this in just a minute here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Our main story this evening is a big discussion on the absolute nonsense from the Sentencing Council, overseen by the Lady Chief Justice, that say that your ethnicity or your background or your sexuality should be brought into account when you're being sentenced. What happened to blind justice? We'll be talking about that in just a second with two top commentators. We're also talking this hour about the sport. We'll get an update on that. and indeed about the King being admitted to hospital over the side effects for cancer treatment. Plenty of time as well to take your calls. You're ringing in on this two-tier issue. We'll explain it all in a second. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or you can send me a WhatsApp voice note 0344 499 1000 or a text message on WhatsApp, same number, or give me a ring for a discussion on the air 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. So this is complicated, but it's also really, really simple. What the Sentencing Council, a group of 14 senior figures in the legal profession, including a Lord Justice, including the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, what they have said is that in pre-sentencing reports, the information that a judge gets in regard to sentencing someone for a crime, they should be given the information and should consider someone's ethnicity, their background, their sexuality, something that has nothing to do with the crime, something they are usually born with. Shabnam Mahmood, who is the Justice Secretary of this country, said, actually, Independent Sentencing Council, I don't think you should do this. She's been pretty consistent in that, although some have criticised her approach. I'm not criticising her approach. I actually think her approach is pretty sensible and pretty good. Let's go through what the Sentencing Council have said. They're not putting anyone up for interview. There's a shock. Their statement reads, the Sentencing Council has given very careful consideration to the Lord Chancellor's request, that's Shabnam Mahmood, request to amend or reconsider its recently published revised guideline imposition of community or custodial sentences. The Council has written to the Lord Chancellor to explain why we have decided not to make the requested changes. I've read the letter. It's 5 pages of absolute guff, let me tell you. I've read every single word of it. It is from William Davis, who is the Lord Justice, William Davis, Chairman of the Sentencing Council. And he, along with the woman who oversees it, Baroness Carr, Sue Carr, have made a huge mistake in this. They're saying that justice is not about what you've done. They're saying justice is about what you are, which is absolute rubbish. The Ministry of Justice have responded to this, the Secretary of State for Justice and Lord Chancellor Shabnam Mahmood. She says, I have been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. This is unacceptable, and I formally set out my objections to this in a letter to the Sentencing Council last week. I am extremely disappointed by the Council's response. All options are on the table and I will legislate if necessary. Shabnam Mahmood is doing the right thing here. She had a reasonable discussion with the Sentencing Council. She didn't do a knee-jerk reaction. She said, let's try to reason with them. Let's have a discussion. They said no. This is what she said on the 5th of March in the House of Commons.
And then let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
So Shabnam Mahmood tweeted today as well. She said, the Sentencing Council is entirely independent. Today's updated guidelines do not represent my views or the views of this government. I will be writing to the Sentencing Council to register my displeasure and to recommend reversing this change to guidance. As someone who's from an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment for the law or for anyone of any kind. There will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. Very similar sentiments to what she said in the House of Commons, and we know that she has backed those up. And I am very happy with how she's backed them up. And she says, my comment today in response to the Sentencing Council's decision not to amend their new guidelines, I have been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment. Well, we've read that out a minute ago, and that is absolutely clear in terms of what she is saying. Shabnam Mahmood, I think, is doing a good job. She's doing the right thing, and the Sentencing Council is doing the wrong thing. Let's get the perspective of Danny Shaw. He's a police and crime and justice commentator. He's also a former advisor to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Luke Giddos is with us as well. He's a lawyer and writer. Danny, do you think legislation will come forward soon on this?
I think that's likely to be the way it's heading, Peter, to be honest. Which I think is a shame that this couldn't have been resolved in a different way. I think the difficulty is that this isn't something the Sentencing Council has come up with overnight in the last couple of weeks. This is something that they've been working on for a couple of years, and they consulted on between the end of 2023 and the start of last year, and neither Robert Jenrick nor Shabnam Mahmood responded to that consultation or put any objections forward when that public consultation was launched. And in fact, the previous Conservative government actually said they didn't have a problem with the draft guidelines. Gareth Bacon was the Ministry of Justice minister at the time, and he actually welcomed this list of people that's now being objected to. So I think the Sentencing Council is saying, look, you had the chance to object. You didn't. We're now in the final phases of preparing this before it goes live, as it were, on April the 1st. We're going to make a couple of tweaks. They've agreed to provide a bit more explanation and clarification in the guidelines, but essentially they're not going to change the substance of them. And you can sort of understand why they're a bit miffed about that, just on the point of view that, you know, this has been a long time in the consultation, and then at the last minute, this all came about, Peter, because Robert Jenrick raised it in the House of Commons. Shabana Mahmood was a bit blindsided by that, and had to respond, you know, quickly on her feet and say, well, I kind of stand with you, Mr. Jenrick. I don't like these guidelines either for political reasons. So, you know, that's the position she's now boxed herself into in a way, and the Sentencing Council's boxed itself in. And so I think, yeah, probably there's going to have to be some legislation to sort it out.
But there should have been far greater scrutiny of this and far greater objection to it before from both Labour and Conservatives. Danny, it's a very interesting one. Luke, what do you make of this?
I think, firstly, it's interesting to dig down into what these changes really mean, because I think for the lay member of the public, it can be hard to understand what this actually means. So I work in courts every day, and I see the impact that ordering a pre-sentence report can have in a defendant's case. The change that the Sentencing Council is talking about is introducing a presumption to order a pre-sentence report where someone is from an ethnic or religious minority background. And it's important to also recognise why they're doing this. They're doing this for an openly political reason, which is to attempt to remedy apparent disparities in the justice system as to how people from ethnic minority backgrounds are treated. Now, those differentials are real. You know, black men, for example, are more likely to go to prison after being sentenced than any other ethnic group. That is something that really requires scrutiny, but it's also something with many possible explanations. There are ways in which black men respond to, for example, the prospect of pleading guilty, which can reduce your sentence, which might be one explanation as to why this is happening. The correct response is not to introduce this change, because I can tell you as a lawyer in court, these reports really matter to the way that a judge approaches the sentencing exercise. When a judge orders a pre-sentence report, they're giving a tacit indication that they're looking at all of the information in a defendant's case before ordering custody. And if they don't order a pre-sentence report, it's a pretty good indication that they think custody is a foregone conclusion. So you could now have a situation where two defendants are accused of the same crime, convicted of the same crime, and with respect to one, there is a presumption that a report should be ordered, and with the other, there's a presumption that it ought not. And that seems to me to be an extremely troubling development for our legal system, and one that is, you know, and I think you're right to say Shabana Mahmood has been good on this, Robert Jenrick has been good on this, and it's also right to say that the Sentencing Council could now just remove this presumption from the guideline. The guideline does deal with other elements of the sentencing process.
And Danny has made the very reasonable point that this has been around, has been in development for a couple of years. But the question is why, Danny, why they want to go down this road, because it's so clear that this is not equal justice under the law.
I think the reason they want to go down the road is because the judges realise that there are these disparities that have been mentioned, very clear disparities in the justice system, and I think this is the flaw in what they're trying to do. They think that somehow by providing more information to the courts in sentencing, they can somehow address these disparities. Now, that is the flaw in the argument, because there is nothing in the evidence that says that if you provide more information in pre-sentence reports or give pre-sentence reports for various groups rather than others, you're going to address the disparities. There's been a lot of research done into why there are these cultural, ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system. No one's quite sure why it is. and it could be to do with factors that are completely outside the courts and the legal system's control.
Well, there may well be magistrates. I agree with what you say, Danny.
I think that's where they've gone wrong, the Sentencing Council. I think they're trying to engineer something that can't be engineered.
Or reverse engineer it. And actually, I'm saying, sorry to interrupt you, Danny, but sort of saying essentially to the judges, you solve society's problems retrospectively through your sentencing, which I just don't think is true. I think we see this a lot of the time. We see this with university admissions, for example. We see this with employment policy. People should be equal before the law. People should be equal in terms of the opportunities they're given. I totally get that. What I don't want is a lack of equality, which seems to be baked in to what the Sentencing Council want to do, Danny.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think drawing up this list of groups, I think was a recipe for trouble. And it suggests to me that the Sentencing Council's overreached itself, and also that there's no one on that body who says, hang on a minute, this isn't very clever politically, and this is a problem. They could easily have put into their guidelines emphasising the importance of these reports, particularly where judges and magistrates don't know very much about the individual before them. Perhaps they haven't come before courts before, or perhaps there are indications that they have a troubling background, or let's say a history of drug use, or other factors that might influence the sentencing. They could have done all that without presenting this list, and we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. They haven't been very cute, in my view, politically.
Okay.
And now their whole existence is potentially in trouble. Because, it's quite possible that Keir Starmer or Shabana Mahmood will say, well, let's scrap this body.
I think that's very likely. Luke, and from your perspective, as a lawyer working day and daily in courts, I mean, we've talked, and Danny has talked and given us the context of the fact that the Sentencing Council had this report, was developing this policy for 2 years. Why do you think they did that? What is your reasoning behind that? But is this just more misguided, or is it more pernicious?
No, I think remember that the justice system and the judiciary have been subject to scrutiny. Look at David Lammy's report into the workings of the criminal justice system that did kickstart a debate about whether the entire system is racially prejudiced. So they do feel under pressure to correct these apparent disparities. So that's probably where it's come from. I don't think the Sentencing Council's job is to be particularly aware of where their of how politically people are going to respond to their decisions. They're supposed to be quite a neutral and objective organisation. So they probably didn't anticipate this level of pushback. I'd be very surprised if they realised that there would be this level of controversy. I would also just put forward that I don't think Keir Starmer will be in a rush to abolish the Sentencing Council. Keir Starmer is at his heart a lawyer. He was an ex-DPP. He would have been, in amongst the Sentencing Council lot when he was
as Director of Public Prosecutions. He will have been on that body, as you correctly say. Listen, great explanation, really interesting to get to the heart of that issue with Danny Shaw and Luke Gittos. Danny is a police and crime and justice commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper, and Luke Gittos is a lawyer and a writer as well. Let us know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Claire is on the line from the Wirral. She has dialed that number. Claire, tell me your thoughts on this.
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Hiya. I think, Peter, this time, you're being very naive about Mahmood. I believe that she knew that exactly what was going on, and it was only because news of what was going on with the Sentencing Council was unearthed by the Conservative Party, and, one of the MPs, Conservative MPs, I can't remember who it was, brought it up, and she seemed surprised.
It was Robert Jenrick, her shadow. He's the Shadow Justice Secretary. Yeah, he brought it up in Parliament, yeah.
Yeah, well, apparently there was a guy, and I did hear about this from some eminent person who was on Talk, and he said that there was a flunky of hers that was actually there during the discussions of what was going to be going on.
Well, the flunky may well not have told her what's going on.
Come off it,
it's possible. It's possible. Well, Claire,
oh my God. Well, okay, but I just really feel that she's just making noises. It was going to be brought in through the back door, basically, and it was because it was called out in Parliament that she had to make excuses.
Well, why object to it then? If she's happy with it going ahead, why not just say, look, I'll look into this and do nothing about it?
She's got to, because she knows the country's going to be up in arms about it. They were bringing it in through the back door. Nobody would have even noticed it. It would have been in through the back door. And, you know, and I just think that she's just having to placate things. But I'll tell you what, Peter, you know, if I could put a bet on with you, you know, just watch and see what exactly happens, whether it all blends into the background, you know, when the next thing happens.
Okay.
That they've done.
What sort of bet are we talking about here, Claire?
What's that?
What sort of bet are we talking about here, Claire?
I don't know. How much do you want to bet with me?
I would say, right. Well, what do we actually want to bet on, Claire? This is my question. Let's. I'll propose it. You let me know what you think. Okay. I don't want to impose this. How about, let's see, it's the 28th of March now. Let's say by the end of April that they've brought forward legislation to abolish this. The Shabana Mahmood's brought that forward. If it goes forward, I think she's going to do it. You donate £10 to a charity of my choice. If it doesn't come through, you donate £10 to a charity of my choice. Sorry, your choice and my choice.
That's the deal. That's the deal.
Happy enough with that? Okay, well, we'll shake hands on that, Claire. That's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. All right, Claire, thanks for your thoughts on that. First time we've done that on air, but not quite Piers Morgan, but £10. Happy enough. I will donate that to a charity of Claire's choice if the legislation has not been brought forward in the House of Commons by the end of April. But I think Shabana Mahmood's going to do it. I have faith in her, even though I often don't have faith in the Labour Party, let me tell you. We're going to talk about the King. Going to go from the Lord Chancellor to the King. The King has been admitted to hospital over side effects from cancer treatment. Rupert Bell is going to bring us the latest on this in just a minute here on Talk.
British people, Australian people. The staff have said this is the first earthquake, the first big earthquake they've ever had. Apparently there was one 20 years ago, but they're still searching for some people who were staying in the hotel. Someone over there is missing his brother at the moment, so they're trying to work out who's here, who's not here. We don't know if we're going to be allowed back in the hotel anytime soon. And also, no news on planes coming in or leaving Bangkok.
Across the UK, DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Barry has said the clocks go forward this weekend. Thanks for the reminder, Barry. I'll be putting mine back to 1940 when this country had some guts, unlike the French, says Barry. Michael in Birchington in Kent says, with regard to two-tier justice, someone said that if you want to destroy a country, first destroy its institutions. This is what is happening now, says Michael. Anne says, we are just driving back to Dubrovnik from Split, so can't phone, but on two-tier justice, if I was an ethnic minority, I'd be insulted that the committee thinks that I'm too stupid to know the difference between right and wrong, that I need special treatment. Absolutely bonkers. I pulled over to send this, by the way. Well, Anne, thank you for pulling over to send this very insightful message there. And yes, I think this is very insulting to so many people, and anything that does that says your ethnicity is to do with the outcome, well, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Every single person should be absolutely straightforward in terms of what justice should be. Gav is in Cornwall and says, rather than keep writing to the Sentencing Council, why doesn't the government now grow a backbone, stop this ridiculous decision in its tracks, disband the Quango, get rid of it? The government are so weak. Why not just sort it out once and for all? Well, Gav, we'll see what they do. I think they're going to bring forward legislation. If you saw me before the break with Claire in the World there, I've bet her the princely sum of £10 to a charity of her choice. I think they're going to bring forward legislation to undo what the Sentencing Council have done before the end of next month. We will see what happens and which charity is the beneficiary. For the meantime, let's talk about the King, because he has experienced temporary side effects of his cancer treatment in a short period of time in hospital. Yesterday, during his suffering from these side effects, then he returned to Clarence House. He's cancelled the tour of Birmingham as well, which was meant to happen today. He is 76 years old, and Rupert Bell is our Talk's royal correspondent. Is this a shock, Rupert?
I think we have to say no, because he's been continually carrying on with treatment, and as anyone knows, when you're undergoing treatment for cancer, not that we know exactly what the nature of the cancer is, there will be side effects, and in his case, he does want to try and push on through and try and operate as near as normal schedule as is possible for a 76-year-old man. And he will be deeply frustrated that he hasn't been able to fulfill his engagements today. Remember, these are often planned months in advance, and so a lot of work will have gone into the various organisations and people he was going to be visiting today. So it will be very galling to him. But I think it just shows the sort of vulnerabilities that he is under. And he's also about to undergo a visit to Italy, where he's due to meet the Pope, who's been obviously suffering his, much publicised health issues as a very elderly Pope as well. So there's it's going to be, he will want to still fulfil that. But he will be frustrated, but obviously it does throw into, concerns for people about just how ill he is, because it's been a long time. He's still been undergoing treatment.
It's over a year now, isn't it? It was February 2024 that he was originally diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, but everyone knows cancer sufferers. There's no miracle cure suddenly for it to disappear, particularly at his age. But I think and the Queen was carrying on her engagements normally yesterday, so presumably there was not undue panic about this. But obviously it does, mean the King has to, because he gets very frustrated. He wants to be out there. He's a workaholic. He wants to make an impact as the new monarch of this country and be out there, because that's what, he's waited, as I say, a long time for this opportunity, and it will be frustrating for him that he's been unable to fulfill his engagements. But I think now, presumably with the weekend, he'll have a chance to sort of regroup, and obviously decisions will be made about how the next week is managed, if there are any cancellations, and obviously going forward to the trip to Italy.
He's 76 years old. The Palace source describing it to the BBC as a most minor bump in the road that is very much heading in the right direction. From what you're hearing, Rupert, do you think that's fair enough to say that actually his treatment is heading in the right direction?
Well, you've got to look at him and think it must be, because he seems to be trying to fulfil as near as normal a schedule as you would expect for the monarch. He doesn't want to sit, and he's doing all the meet and greets that is expected of him, holding audiences. He then goes out and about. So I suppose it is a minor bump in the road, but a very frustrating bump. It's a bit like the potholes on the road. It's just if someone, he wants probably to get them repaired, and so he can get back out there as quickly as possible. But I hope he will be able to fulfill his trip to Italy, because I know how much he's looking forward to that. So overall, it is, I think, that might be a suitable assessment of just where his health situation is, bearing in mind not only his, but obviously his daughter-in-law as well is starting to have a more normal schedule. But again, it's by no means a full one.
Tell us about Catherine as well, the Princess of Wales. She has had her own battle with cancer. How's she at the moment?
Well, I think, we've seen pictures. She looks well. And obviously, though, still very mindful about how much she's out and about. And we saw at rugby recently. We've seen her with the Irish Guards recently for St Patrick's Day celebrations. So we've very much seen her out and about. But again, I suppose with the holidays coming around, we will see, she very much protects the school holidays, like a lot of working people. But obviously, we will expect to see her, I'm sure. There will be plenty of opportunities to see her, whether it be at Wimbledon and other places over the coming months. But looking at what you see, is that the fact is she does appear to be recovering in her own time. But obviously the King is the most significant. He wants to be out there. There's a lot of work that he wants to do, and he will be disappointed that he's not only frustrated for himself, but he's let down the people he was expecting to meet today in Birmingham.
He won't want to. He won't want to have done that. Just finally, there was some discussion recently about royal tours, and previously, of course, they were done in a very different way. This sort of short, sharp idea that you go somewhere for a short period of time, perhaps reacting to how the royals work now, and also that you don't need to spend such a long time getting to these places. Do you think that's the way the future of these things are going to be done, particularly when you have slimmed down down royal family and fewer of them to go around, essentially?
You're referring there to the Estonia trip of the Prince of Wales, which was 36 hours in and out. Thank you very much. But a very busy time, because he wants to keep his sort of family time at the weekend sacrosanct and all that. But I think it is, the Prince and Princess of Wales had their with their trip to the Caribbean went a bit wrong. He wants to do the short trips because he thinks they can be more impactful. But that's not always going to be the case, because you can't do a 36-hour trip in and out to somewhere like Australia, where, of course, the royal family is still the head of state. So it's not always going to be so, but I do think it is something that they want to say, right, we'll go in, make an impact, and that's very much the Prince of Wales's modus operandi. He doesn't want to just go in and be sort of hanging around. He wants to make sure that whatever he does and wherever he goes, it has an impact, and it's the soft power element of the royal family, which we have seen trying to broker all the shenanigans around President Trump, for what's going on with Trump's view of economically with this country. He still has a soft spot for the royal family, so they have an important part to play in trying to keep President Trump under lock and key, or whatever it is that they need to do to him to make it easier. But obviously, from the royal family point of view, it is something I think we'll see much more of.
Rupert, thank you. That's Rupert Bell there, Talks Royal correspondent. Let me know your thoughts on the King's Health. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss. There are people who want to get in on mental health and welfare and two-tier justice. We're going to take your calls next, and if you want to be added to the people on the air between now and 7 and in the next section as well, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Anne in Yorkshire has been in touch on this two-tier justice idea. She says, "Hi Peter, it looks like judges have unconscious bias, so they should be sent on a DEI course instead of this rubbish. They should be sacked along with all the quangos. I've just about had enough," says Anne. Paul is in Southampton and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Paul, what would you like to say on this?
Peter, how are you doing?
Okay, thanks. Are you well?
Yeah, I am, thank you. I'm just irritated by all this with this sentencing council. All the judge needs to know is, are you an habitual criminal or not? And did you commit the crime or not?
Exactly.
Why do we have to look into their past or their present or their future?
Shouldn't have to.
What's that got to do with it?
Really straightforward. Have you committed the crime or not?
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely, it's the Liberals and the whiny little crybabies are always trying to pass it on. It's always somebody else's fault. It doesn't matter if you're black, brown, green, orange or purple. If you committed the crime, you're in front of the judge and you've got to stand there and do it and take the punishment.
Also, the point as well, Paul, first of all, you're absolutely correct in every single word you say. And secondly, we're meant as a society not to judge people on the colour of their skin. So
well, that's why, yeah.
No matter who the person is, no matter what their skin colour, no matter what their ethnic background, their sexuality, whatever, we're not meant to judge them. We're all meant to say, okay, fair enough, yeah, you can have that job, or I can employ you, or I can be treated by this person, or this person can teach my child, or whatever. That's fine. That's okay. I'm pretty happy with that. But in this instance, oh, you've done something wrong. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take all these things that you can't control, that you have no control over, your ethnicity, your sexuality, and we're going to say, well, those things are going to mean that you get a lesser sentence. It's just two-tier justice. Straightforward. It's so straightforward, Paul. And these clowns in the Sentencing Council, who are meant to be some of the most intelligent people in the country, can't see that.
Well, I disagree. These people are the same as our parliamentarians. I keep hearing some of your guests and that calling them elite. They are not elite. Elite means they are the best of the best. And all through it just seems our whole society from the top is collapsing. It's becoming a calamity. Mahmood, she should have known this. That's just absolute, like you say, that's lies. She must have known.
I just sometimes feel, I don't know about you, Paul, but I sometimes feel I've got to the end of the yellow brick road and there's a man behind the curtain turning a wheel.
Yeah. Well, there's not a man. There's a jackass turning the wheel.
Okay.
It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, the whole state of our government is it's always somebody else's fault.
You're absolutely right, Paul. I can't disagree with a single word you've said. Thank you very much for that. That's Paul in Southampton. Steve's in Leeds. Steve, tell me your thoughts on this.
It's the idea of the Sentencing Council is promoting two-tier justice. The idea of these pre-sentencing reports has been around for decades, and they've always promoted two-tier justice. Because if you look at the parameters of a pre-sentencing report, it favours people who are on drugs, mental health issues, whether they're pregnant. So in effect, if you go to court as an ordinary working person that's got no mental health issues, you're not on benefits, you're not on drugs, you can't have one of those applied to you. It's always about people saying, give me a good excuse.
Do you not think there should be pre-sentencing reports at all? Do you think they should be abolished?
No, I don't think they should. When I was a child and I did something wrong, my father didn't say, if you give me a good excuse, you'll get away with it.
Yeah.
You got punished.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, bear in mind, pre-sentencing reports come after you've been found guilty.
Yeah, that's right.
You've had your chance to make your excuse, and this is why people have lost faith in the law, because we now have a reason to give them a lesser sentence in the first place because of a pre-sentencing report, and then we give them a sentence where they only...
Well, judges would say, Steve, they would say, actually, we need a bit more context. We need to know about this offender. We need to know the circumstances that they live in. Not necessarily to give an excuse necessarily, but just to say, what is the full picture here? What's the full context? Do you not think that's reasonable?
Well, what I'd say to those judges, Peter, is there's never been a pre-sentencing report that's increased somebody's sentence.
Okay.
Don't ever use to decrease it, yeah?
Okay.
So if it was a case of we need to understand more, yeah, you'd have people going, actually, you're going to get 5 years, we're making it 10. It's all about trying to reduce the flow of people into prison because there are no spaces.
Yeah.
So if we drop from 5 years to 3 because of pre-sentencing reports, look at that shoplifter the other week. It was on your programme. Sold 1,500 quid worth of product from Harrods, and he got a 6-month suspended sentence because pre-sentencing report said he was hungry.
Yeah.
It's just an excuse to reduce the population of prison.
Steve, thanks for your thoughts. Oh, sorry, final point. Go on ahead, Steve.
No, it's all down to the justice system is broken. And the average person in the street says, you know what, I'm not surprised kids grow up with no sense of morality because all they see is everybody getting away with it.
Steve, I think a lot of people will agree with that. I certainly do. Thank you for your thoughts there. Steve is in Leeds. Another issue that is a big one, not just in this show, but over the course of this week and beyond this week as well, is welfare and disability benefits that people are getting. Fiona has been in touch from Aberdeenshire. And Fiona, I understand you're going through some very serious treatment yourself at the moment.
I am under... Oh, I'm so... I'm so happy that I've actually spoken to you because you're so compassionate. I've got a few things that I would like to speak.
Well, you've time to say it, Fiona, so just take your time and just make your points.
I know, I'm quite distressed, to be quite honest. I've undergone a lot of treatment with the Macmillan nurses, and I've got cancer, and I'm still... From 2022, I'm still having to get treatment because all the kind of...
it's complicated. It's a complicated treatment.
It's very complicated.
I'm so sorry to hear you're going through this, Fiona.
Yes, yeah. But I'm now, when I'm hearing all the stuff about people that are, not eligible or whatever, I'm eligible because I can hardly walk, and it's hard. It's hard work.
Do you mind me asking what benefits you get, Fiona?
I get adult disability allowance, and I don't really want to say this over the phone.
Don't say what you don't want to say, Fiona. You just say what you want to say, okay? I'm not forcing you at all.
Basically, if I cannot walk upstairs, I need to have something to help me.
Sure, I understand. I understand. Yeah.
I don't want to go down that.
Yeah.
And if I'm going, to a bus, I've got to make sure that, I've got pads there for me. Sure. That kind of thing. It's
I mean, Fiona, I don't see any reason. First of all, you're clearly having a really tough time, and I'm sorry to hear it.
I live by myself. I've got my dog who's barking outside.
Oh, he's on the radio too. We can hear him as well.
Yes.
So I don't think you should be worried at all. I don't think that, you're clearly genuinely having a tough time. I think the problem, there are lots of problems in the system. There are people who are not genuinely disabled. There are people who will be assessed for these things that will not be found eligible. But there's nothing you've told me that would make me worry at all for you, Fiona, in terms of your
my
benefits.
Situation. And as I say, I've got a person that comes every second year to assess.
Yep.
She's here for 3 months. Oh no, I'm sorry. My dog is.
Just take your time, Fiona. It's okay. Don't worry about the dog.
Yeah, but basically, she comes into the house. She looks at what I can do and what I can't do, and I've had adult disability. And when this new stuff has come through from the government about people that are not having adult disability, I am so stressed out, completely stressed out, because I'm thinking, is this going to be me?
I don't think it is, Fiona. I don't see any reason why you would have any benefits taken off you. And I'm able-bodied. I'm a taxpayer. I don't go through what you're going through, and I have no problem whatsoever, as I'm sure there are loads of people listening to this who have no problem with some of their taxes going to you to help you, because you need help, Fiona, and that's okay.
I do.
That's okay.
I do.
That's
I do.
okay.
But, you know, I've received now today that I need to have cardiology, CT, or I can't remember. I've just got everything. It's all over my head at the present moment. And I've got to get this sorted with my jaw when I've had chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy has reacted to my bones. And
You've a lot on your plate, Fiona, but I'm so sorry to hear it, and I really want you to try as much as you can not to worry and to try to get support. I mean, we can have this conversation, but there are professional people who can help you.
Could you do that? Because at the present moment, I'm just imploded.
Well, what we're going to do, I'm going to ask one of the producers behind the scenes just to have a quick chat with you to make sure you're okay, Fiona, and also maybe give you some ideas of organisations maybe to contact to give you a bit of support, even just on the phone, to have a proper chat about this, to go through things and to try to we'll try to make things calmer for you, Fiona. But I wish you all the very, very best, and I hope that I think what Fiona's saying, and I think what Fiona represents is the fear from so many different people who are very, very worried about this, and they should. Fiona, I know we're talking to her behind the scenes now. Jodie is a very good colleague of mine. She's one of the producers of this programme, and she's going to talk to Fiona, and I would urge Fiona and anyone else affected by this to contact your MP, in Fiona's case in Aberdeenshire there, your MSP, about this. If they get notification of a reduction and they think it's wrong, their MP can help. Their MSP, they're a member of the Assembly in Northern Ireland or in Wales, the Senate, they can help them fight an appeal, and that's what these people are for, because a lot of people really think that politicians are out of touch and they've nothing to do with what their life, and they're so disconnected. And sometimes that's true. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not saying that there aren't politicians that aren't there that don't fit that description. But there are a load of people who work in MPs' offices, constituency workers, case workers. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but I have helped a couple of people behind the scenes with this over the last couple of months. And one person in particular who I helped contact their MP, because I know their MP is a person who comes on these programmes every now and again, and they got a little bit of help. And that's all you need to do. You just need to drop them an email and say, look, I'm having this problem. I need some help. Essentially, it's their job to help you, those caseworkers and those MPs. And a review of that support that you have, or a review of the support by an organisation, by a support organisation or an MP's team, or an Assembly member or a Scottish Parliament member's team, they can look at everything you've got and they can say, hold on, there's a gap here. They know the system backwards. That's part of what they do. Use that. You're paying your taxes to them as well. By all means, contact them if you're in that kind of situation. And if you want more information on this, talk.tv/helplines. There's a lot of information there if you go to our website, talk.tv/helplines. But there's another website that I would highly recommend, which is called writetothem.com. Write to them, WRITETOTHEM.com. Which is a really good website. You can put in your postcode. If you don't know who your local councillor is, or your local Assembly member, or even your MP, if you don't know who that is, go to writetothem.com. It's a great website. You can put in your postcode. It tells you all the people that represent you and how to contact them. And if you have any problems, like Fiona is saying, well then that is something that can be done, and those people are there. They're paid to help you, and there are a lot of community voluntary organisations that can help as well, and we'll try to make sure that Fiona gets a little bit of help, or is at least steered in the right direction there as well. We're going to talk about the sport next here on Talk. Stay with us.
I wasn't expecting to have to speak to Just Stop Oil, so I just decided to biff them off, because I don't wish to entertain them at all in any way, shape or form. I find them odious creatures, ghastly individuals, completely and utterly, champagne socialist types. And I think that they haven't given up because they've won. I think they've given up because they don't really like actually being put in prison, which is now what's happening to them.
Well, I don't know, Mike. It seems they're making government policy at the moment. They have succeeded in their demand to get, Britain to stop issuing new oil and gas licences in the North Sea.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Amy in South East London, who has said, I have just been asked for ID when buying some spray glue in Poundland. I'm 44. I will take these compliments where I can find them. Now it's time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Uma Garov is with me here in the studio, TalkSport presenter. Great to see you here. How are you doing? You well?
I'm great.
Women's football in the spotlight last night. Can you tell us about who was playing?
Yes, I can. It was Chelsea and Man City for the 4th time in a row, so kind of a familiar story, but honestly it was quite funny because it was the second leg of their Champions League quarter-final, and on Wednesday night what had happened is Arsenal women had gone into their semi-final 2-0 down against Real Madrid, and they'd had this remarkable comeback, winning 3-0 there and obviously winning the tie, and everyone was like, no one's done this since Arsenal first did it in 2004, and then Chelsea did exactly the same thing last night. And you just think, okay, Chelsea are just coming for every single record. They'd gone in 2-0 down over at Stamford Bridge. Absolutely remarkable turnaround, 3-0 win for them there, which means we now have 2 English teams in the semi-finals of the Women's Champions League, which is huge. We could have an all-English final, which would be amazing. Arsenal, Chelsea, 2 of the big guns, but they've got to get past Lyon and Barcelona first. But it means also Chelsea's quadruple is still on, which is terrifying. They just win everything in women's football. It's quite annoying if you're not a Chelsea fan, which I'm not.
It's a big weekend in the FA Cup as well. The quarter-finals are here. In fact, my show tomorrow is only between 10 and 12. Cruelly robbed of an hour because of the FA Cup quarter-finals. Why is the competition so exciting so far this year, do you think?
I think it's one of the most open competitions we've had for years. If you look at the teams that are still left in, and we've got all of these ties on TalkSport across the weekend, but it's Fulham Palace tomorrow first, and then Brighton Nottingham Forest, and then on Sunday Preston North End against Aston Villa.
You don't expect them to be at this stage of the competition.
They're the only non-Premier League side still left in it, and it's really funny because Preston fans literally a couple of weeks ago were branding their own team the most boring side ever, and now they've finally got something exciting to go up against Villa, of course, who will give them a good run for their money. And then that last tie is Bournemouth against Man City. Pep Guardiola, Man City manager, coming out with some remarkable comments today, saying he thinks that his side don't deserve a bonus this year, even if they win the Club World Cup. The Club World Cup, of course, this big tournament's happening this summer with the best teams from around the world, and he's come out and said, no, we don't deserve a bonus this year, even if we win that, even if we win the FA Cup, even if they get into the Champions League. It shows you how high their standards are, but you almost feel sorry for him now. He looks so crestfallen.
I'm not sure I feel sorry for people, for Premier League footballers not getting a bonus.
Fair enough.
I think they'll probably probably survive. They might be down to the last 10 million, which would be dreadful.
It's hard luck.
I'd love to be in that position. Let's talk about some other overpaid prima donnas in the Formula 1 as the Red Bull Racing have brutally sacked their rookie driver after 2 races. What's happened?
This is horrible, honestly. I mean, this has been compared to, imagine you're on the job for 2 days and you get sacked. And he's 23. Liam Lawson's been let go by Red Bull because of his performances in the first 2 Grand Prix weekends.
What went wrong?
He finished really low down, just bad performances, didn't look like he was kind of going to improve. It's been spoken about now, and they said that his confidence was really low, and they've brought in Yuki Tsunoda instead, who's a far more experienced driver, and they've actually come out and said, we made a mistake appointing him in the first place, we never should have given it to him. Just gets kind of worse and worse for this poor kid. The good news for him is he's going to go down into the kind of tier 2 racing, and his career's not over, but Red Bull are known for doing this. They sack their drivers really ruthlessly. Max Verstappen obviously is the kind of partner racer there, and he was so dominant last season, and he wants someone who's kind of good alongside him. But yeah, Red Bull, just not very nice boss to have, is it?
Well, they've given him wings away from those racing tracks. Back to football. Arsenal have finally got a glimmer of hope. They've had a big injury crisis recently. A few people almost back to full fitness.
Yes, namely Bukayo Saka, of course, not only an Arsenal legend but an England favourite as well. He's back in full training, which is great news for them. Obviously, they're not playing this weekend, but they are back in Premier League action.
See, what you could have said there was from sack to Saka. you missed that opportunity, I'm afraid.
Oh, no. Well, you did the link.
Yeah, well, fair point. Apologies, I interrupted you.
No, but he's back in training, which is good news for them. The other, remarkably good news for them is they play Real Madrid in their quarter-final as well, as the women did. But 4 of Real Madrid's players are possibly facing a suspension because Atletico Madrid, who they played in the derby a couple of weeks ago, have reported some of their players for making indecent gestures to their fans, basically just sort of rubbing it in their faces when they won, but you're not really allowed to do that. So 4 of the best players may or may not get suspended, but it's sort of like they've just dobbed them in because they're just angry that they lost. So it would be great news for Arsenal, isn't it? I mean, yeah, take them out, take their best players out so we can win, but we will see.
Well, we got through all of the sport without Uma making an indecent gesture to me, I can confirm. Although there's still time.
Never
There's still time.
Never know.
That's it. There's still time. Uma, thank you very much indeed. That's Uma Gurev there, who is a talkSPORT presenter. Which of these matches are you most looking forward to, actually, Uma?
Ooh, I think Bournemouth Man City is going to be a good one. Actually, no, I'm going to say Preston, North End, Villa, because I'd just love it if Preston won. Let's just say it now. Preston are going to win the FA Cup, right?
Okay, there we are. There's our prediction. Thank you very much indeed for that. Quite a lot of reaction to the conversation with Fiona a little bit earlier on, and Barry says, I'm in a similar situation to Fiona. She speaks for many of us who now really fear how the cuts in public opinions being whipped up will affect us. Well, I hope we're not whipping public opinion up in any way. I think we're just reflecting, I hope anyway, what people think of these things and having a reasonable debate on all of it, Barry. But if you're in a similar situation to Fiona, I do sympathise with you. It's a rough time. And we have Michael in Northumberland who says, good on you for taking Fiona's call. She's a perfect example of exactly why we have a benefit system and why it needs to be looked after properly. I'm happy for my taxes to be used to help people like Fiona. I really hope the Labour MPs realise this at some point, that they are right to do the right thing by our people, not those from every other country. All the best to Fiona, says Michael in Northumberland. Very compassionate message there from him. Paul in Leicester has given me a call about the two-tier justice in this country, the big theme, the big thing that we're discussing today. Paul, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Yeah, if we'd had this conversation early noughties, you'd been predicted some of the things that we're talking about today. You'd have said you need go into the madhouse. And I'm thinking, the key architect, the guy who always likes to put his head above the parapet, Mr. Blair, he's nowhere to be seen last year or two. Is that because a lot of the policies and the quangos he introduced in a generational time are coming home to roost now, 20 years on? He's nowhere to be seen, is there?
Well, I'd be very happy with his nowhere to be seen, but he seems to pop up every now and again with his infrequent interventions, as he calls them, rare interventions. But Paul, there is this culture, isn't there? There is this culture of these organisations that are independent and they have absolutely no actual accountability, like the Sentencing Council.
But the quangos and that, the Parliament are the executive, aren't they? They are the executive that can overrule anything. And we've got people in there, we've had people in there from 2010, Cameron, who are wishy-washy liberal lefts, we've had Chancellor Exchequers who know that per capita you should do GDP, not by mass immigration. But people like Philip Hammond, what is it with them? There must have been something in it for them, because you will go to universities and all this.
Or maybe it's worse, Paul, maybe they just believe it.
I don't know, Peter. It just, as Ian Collins often said, it's an upside-down world.
Yeah.
Absolutely upside-down world. Okay, I'm a white guy. We're over 20. It's not the point, is it? It's, you start doing that. Can it be changed before April Fool's Day, Peter? Can it still be changed after?
No, I don't think it can. I think it's happening. The question is, are they going to actually legislate for it? I have every hope that they will, but we'll see. Paul, thanks for your points there. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's Paul in Leicester there. Thanks also to Helen, who's been in touch about age. About age, and we had a texter earlier who was saying that she'd been ID despite being 44. Helen says, I have an Iceland club card and OAP's got a discount of a Tuesday. I was asked to prove my age. I'm 73 and wanted to kiss the young man, said Helen. Well, Helen, good for you. You're clearly looking a lot younger than your years, and that can only be a good thing. We're going to continue to talk about what is going on with our two-tier justice system. We're going to talk about Ed Miliband being forced to set aside £8 billion over a risky net zero plan, and to a DUP MP in Northern Ireland who was being disgracefully treated. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. We've been talking for the last couple of hours about the two-tier justice in this country. It's coming in a few days' time. There's an independent organisation called the Sentencing Council with very senior legal figures. They want it to be taken into account your ethnicity, your background, your sexuality perhaps, in regard to how you're sentenced if you've committed a crime. Even murder, even rape, even armed robbery. I think it's nonsense. I'm going to tell you why in a second. This hour, we're also going to talk to an MP for the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland. She has had absolutely horrendous abuse online because of her appearance. She's speaking out because she thinks it's wrong and needs to be raised. We also know that that has started a lot of other elected people saying, yeah, it happens to me, and this is something that has to stop. We've got to engage with people. We've got to make sure that we have arguments with people. That's fine, but their appearance shouldn't be something that they are criticised over. We'll talk to Carla Lockhart very, very soon. Angela Knight is going to be with us as well, talking about Ed Miliband, forced to set aside £8 billion over a risky net zero plan. Guess what? Net zero just isn't going to work. Let us know your thoughts on any of these topics. Plenty of time to get your call on the air between now and 7. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note 0344 499 1000, the main number that can be used to send me a WhatsApp text message or to give me a ring for a live conversation on the air. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. So I'm with you for the next hour, and then Kevin O'Sullivan will be live in this studio for 2 hours from between 7 and 9, and then between 9 and 10, What Just Happened will be on. I'm back tomorrow between 10 and 12, and Sunday between 10 and 1, and indeed on Tuesday, remarkably, Jeremy's taking a day off, and I will be on Drive on Tuesday between 4 and 7, so I hope you can join me for that as well. Now, on this Sentencing Council thing, this is the Sentencing Council group of very senior legal figures, including the Lady Chief Justice Sue Carr, Baroness Sue Carr, and indeed the Lord Justice. There are people who are involved with the Crown Prosecution Service. In fact, the person who did the job that Keir Starmer used to do, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, he's on there. They put forward this idea, this guidance that actually in pre-sentence reports, when judges decide how they're going to sentence people, that it should be taken into account your ethnicity, your background, your sexuality, protected characteristics, which have absolutely nothing to do with whether you committed a crime or not. That is what they say should be taken into account. Lots of people annoyed about this, including the Justice Secretary, the Shadow Justice Secretary. They're both saying, let's not do it. The Sentencing Council had a meeting with the Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor Shabna Mahmood. They've released a statement today, and they're not putting anyone up for interview, despite the fact we asked them, and I'm sure many others have too. The Sentencing Council has given very careful consideration to the Lord Chancellor's request to amend or reconsider its recently published revised guideline imposition of community or custodial sentences. The Council has written to the Lord Chancellor to explain why we have decided not to make the requested changes. I read that letter. It's a 5-page letter from William Davis, who is one of the very senior people. I think he's the chairman actually of the Sentencing Council. It's a load of bunkum. It is absolute bunkum. They're saying that these things should be taken into account. They absolutely should not be. This is Lord Justice William Davies, and he is under Baroness Carr, Sue Carr, who's the Lady Chief Justice. The Ministry of Justice, they've got a statement out on this. The Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice Shabna Mahmood says, I've been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes, the outcome of a court case, essentially, someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. This is unacceptable, and I formally set out my objections to this in a letter to the Sentencing Council last week. I am extremely disappointed by the Council's response. All options are on the table, and I will legislate if necessary. I think she should legislate. I think Shabna Mahmood, in fact, has a duty to legislate, because if she legislates, it means the Sentencing Council can be told, no, you're wrong. Your ethnicity, your background, your sexuality, that's nothing to do with whether you should go to prison or not. In fairness to Shabna Mahmood, who I think has done the right thing on this, it'll be interesting to see whether she puts legislation forward. I think she should. This is what she said on the 5th of March.
And then let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
So that's Shabna Mahmood speaking on the 5th of March. Now, she is saying much the same thing as the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick. He brought this into the public domain, saying that the Sentencing Council shouldn't do that. Shabna Mahmood, my comment today in response to the Sentencing Council's decision not to amend their new guidelines. The Lord Chancellor, Justice Secretary, Shabna Mahmood, she says, I've been clear in my view that these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture or religion. This is unacceptable. She set out her objections, and she says she will legislate if necessary. I think she's probably going to have to. Let's talk to Rakib Hassan, the social policy analyst. Dr. Hassan is, we've spoken to him on a number of times on this. Rakib, are you surprised by what the Sentencing Council have said essentially to Shabna Mahmood? Doesn't matter that you're the Justice Secretary, doesn't matter you're democratically elected, you're wrong, we're going to do whatever on earth we want to do.
Well, it sounds like this unaccountable body was hugely dismissive of the concerns which was raised by the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. And I think she raised perfectly legitimate concerns. I think that these new sentencing guidelines, it would move us towards a two-tier criminal justice system, where if you belong to a particular group, it would usually be considered necessary to have a pre-sentencing report. These pre-sentencing reports, ultimately, they contextualise the crime. They provide it with context. So it's generally exploring and fleshing out mitigating factors. And my worry is that this would usually be considered necessary if the person in question belonged to an ethnic, cultural or religious minority. So you could have a situation where someone might use their cultural beliefs, their religious values, and indeed their ancestry, and frame that and ultimately portray that as grounds to ultimately ask for a more lenient sentence. And I think that's a very dangerous road to go down.
Is it outside the realms? I don't want to be sensationalist about this. I don't want to set any hares running that shouldn't be set running. But Rakib, is it out of the realms of possibility that someone who is on a charge of rape, who is part of a grooming gang, could say, well, actually, I didn't know, because I didn't know this was wrong, because part of the way I've been brought up, part of the ethnic culture that I'm part of, I'm not saying all Muslims do this by any stretch of the imagination, but clearly there is a cultural problem here in regard to treatment of women. Well, actually, my ethnicity means that you should give me a shorter sentence.
The issue with these new sentencing guidelines is they risk a floodgate of these pre-sentencing reports where there'll be a great deal of emphasis on cultural norms and beliefs. And I think that is a very serious problem, because ultimately what we're talking about here is multicultural governance, which fundamentally undermines the principle of equality before the law. And the Justice Secretary has used the phrase deferential treatment. Ultimately, this is preferential treatment for minority groups. I think it's also mentioned that if someone identifies as transgender, that was also one of the cohorts which was named in these new sentencing guidelines. So I think that this is a very risky road to go down. I think it ultimately undermines the principle of equality and neutrality before the law, and I think that it ultimately undermines that classical British sense of fair play as well.
And justice being blind. I just want to give you a flavour, Ricky, before we continue the conversation, of what a few people are saying. Adrian says, it feels as if we're living in a dictatorship. How can the Sentencing Council be allowed to introduce blatantly racist instructions? Is there no way legal action can be brought against the council? Well, Adrian, there is a thought that there could be legislation to change this. I think it's racist. Do you, Rakib?
Well, I think that it's clearly it's ultimately injecting racial preferential treatment in our criminal justice system. I think that that's very clear from the guidelines in terms of how they're framed and constructed. And I think for me, I would really go down the road of looking to actually abolishing the Sentencing Council. I know that Labour's already announced they'd be scrapping NHS England. I think this is another quango that we could do without. And I think it really shows you the problem in terms of depoliticising decision-making power and control, and ultimately transferring it to these unaccountable bodies. And I think that they've actually shown a great deal of disrespect towards the Justice Secretary. And ultimately, the Ministry of Justice is the Sentencing Council's parent department. So I think I'm slightly taken aback by how dismissive the Sentencing Council has been in terms of the perfectly legitimate concerns which have been raised by the Justice Secretary.
Neil says, just sums up our MPs, don't write a letter, get rid of the council. They are a quango and therefore can be closed down. It's a gravy train. It's pathetic. Amanda says, two-tier justice. It's a known fact. Very academically gifted people lack basic common sense, as we see here. Well, Amanda, I was privileged to go to Oxford University, and there are many people there. It was a miracle they could tie their shoelaces. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Why do you think they went in this direction, Rakib?
Well, I think that what we've seen in recent times is that there's been a strong emphasis on racial equality, and I think that Britain has made significant strides over the last 25 years or so when it comes to racial equality. But I think that with the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement in particular, but also the emergence of radical transgenderism, I think that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. To the point where we have this situation where the Sentencing Council, in my view, has provided new guidelines which risks minorities becoming the beneficiaries of preferential treatment. And I think that's a very dangerous road to go down in terms of our multiracial and multi-ethnic and multi-faith democracy. And I think that the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, he's made a very good point that actually these new guidelines would be unfair, especially if you were to be white and if you had a Christian religious background.
Yeah, and there is clear discrimination in that regard. It's interesting, we've heard from a magistrate today, a guy texted in, Steve, to say that he's a magistrate. He's thinking actually of leaving being a magistrate, and a lot of magistrates, in fact I think perhaps all of them are volunteers, and he's thinking of leaving because of what he sees is a wokeness in this. And again, it just comes back to the very fundamental principle that you want justice to be blind and you want it to be everyone to be equal before the law, Rakib. I just wonder what your reaction to that is.
No, I think it's a crying shame that we have serving magistrates who feel that way, and they feel alienated by the very criminal justice system that they serve in. And I think if you really believe and you hold dearly that principle of equality before the law, then you're going to feel very uncomfortable with these new sentencing guidelines. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me if there's people operating within that particular sphere who really believe in fairness and justice, proper justice, that they might be looking to withdraw from themselves from that system because they are so uncomfortable with the new sentencing guidelines.
And people like Steve are the kind of people that we need in that system. Dr. Rakib Hassan, thank you very much indeed. He is a social policy analyst. Let's speak to Phil in Hull, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Phil, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
Well, there's a couple of things actually. As an 80-year-old white heterosexual, I'm starting to panic a little bit because it seems that now I'm being discriminated against by this two-tier system. But a couple of things is, the first thing is, I'm giving Mahmood the benefit of the doubt that she's not been economical with the truth.
Okay.
Bearing in mind that she has representatives of the Justice Department in that room. Now, either A, they're totally incompetent and they can't see the ramifications of what's going on, or B, they agree with it, in which case it's probably worse.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what is the point of having a Justice Secretary in charge of this quango if they disregard everything she says?
Yeah, well, they're meant to be independent, and in fairness, they can say what they were. But listen, I worked for the Ministry of Justice. I was a special advisor to the one of Shabnam Mahmood's predecessors, Sir Robert Buckland. And I remember saying to civil servants, I said, look, if you have the slightest doubt that something is going to be a crisis, is going to be controversial, is going to be objected to, is going to be something that Robert won't like, or I won't like, I want you to come into my office, I want you to jump up and down, and I want you to say, listen to me, we need to discuss this, regardless of your personal feelings. And actually, in fairness to a number of civil servants, they did that. That clearly didn't happen in this case. Shabnam Mahmood's dealing with all sorts of different things, but arguably she should have had a better grip on this. She is saying that she might legislate against this, she might bring legislation forward to get rid of this guidance. Do you think she should abolish the Sentencing Council, Phil?
Absolutely. And the other thing to it is this Baroness Carr is the one who finger-wagged at Badenoch and Starmer about criticism of...
How dare they criticise a judge? How dare they do that? No.
And she sort of said, how dare you?
Well, I'm telling you, Phil, there's free speech in this country, and I think she needs a reminder of that.
But the thing... nothing applies to them. They think they are above the law itself. I think they honestly believe that they're above the law. And if you look at some of the decisions they make, I mean, Mike Graham has them on every morning, doesn't he? The joke of the day sort of thing is, you know, they don't like chicken nuggets, so they can't get deported. He's Polish, but he can't speak Polish.
Phil, I'm going to tell you what one of the members of this Sentencing Council is called. I am not making this up, Phil. This is absolutely true. There is a member of the Sentencing Council, and her name is Jo King.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Says everything, doesn't it? Phil, thanks for your thoughts. That's Phil in Hull. Leslie says, how can Starmer, as the former head of the Department of Public Prosecutions, he was Director of Public Prosecutions, former head of the Crown Prosecution Service, let this happen? It is racist, it is discriminatory, says Leslie, and thank you to Leslie for that. Barry's been in touch about our next story, which is Ed Miliband, forced to set aside 8 billion quid over what's been called a risky net zero plan. I think net zero is very, very risky indeed. I don't want the lights to go out. Barry says £8 billion. That's more than enough to cover benefit savings, farmers' tax and pensions, cold weather payments. Miliband is a menace. We're going to hear more about this from Angela Knight. She is a former Chief Executive of Energy UK, former Treasury Minister for the Conservatives. She will bring us up to date on all the issues in regard to that. I want to hear what you have to say, not just about two-tier justice, not just about Ed Miliband, but about online trolling of politicians. We're going to talk about that as well very soon. Stay with us here on Talk.
Been a political reporter for something like 20 years now, and you're absolutely right that it's pretty rare for prime ministers to sack their chancellors. That is quite the nuclear button. Actually, I think Rishi did it, didn't he? Or at least Nadhim Zahawi had to resign. So, it does happen a bit. But it's a drastic thing, and especially so newly into the life of an administration.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ed Miliband is, of course, the Energy Secretary and Net Zero Secretary, and he's been forced to set aside £8 billion to cover the risk of a carbon capture disaster as the costs of net zero have been stacking up. He's taken the charge to compensate companies in case the technology fails. This £8 billion is thought to be in addition to the £22 billion funding and subsidised already pledged by the government to support the industry, which is just essentially starting up. Angela Knight is the former Chief Executive of Energy UK. She's a former Treasury Minister for the Conservatives as well. Angela, shouldn't we just let the market decide whether this is a success or not?
It's new technology. I think even their association refers to it as nascent technology. And whilst it works in a laboratory and in small scale, the sorts of scale that we're talking about here in the UK means that in some respects it's really leading edge. And when something is leading edge, you don't know whether it's going to work. I don't know whether it's going to work. and you want industry to say, okay, I'll have a crack at it, but industry is not going to do that unless it has at least a backstop to fall back on, should they find that actually you cannot do carbon capture and storage in the size and the quantity that the government's been talking about. So that's why they've made that contingent liability there.
Do you think it's a reasonable thing to do, especially when there's so many other pressures, but various people already texting in saying, hold on a second, it would only take 1.4 billion to deal with the winter fuel allowance, welfare cuts and so on. I mean, 8 billion is a lot of money.
Yes, it's not 8 billion that's going to be spent. It's 8 billion that's sitting there that they hope that nobody will ever call upon it.
Yes.
So it's kind of a sort of grey area as far as accounting is concerned. But what it does do is it makes two things very clear. The first is that net zero is a very big cost indeed. This is just another piece of costings that's come out of the woodwork. So it does say that. And secondly, of course, it makes very clear that the impression having been given that carbon capture and storage is something that you can do, and pick some of our big industrial areas where there's a lot of CO2 produced, like, for example, in some of the northeast areas. You know, the impression given is that the technology is ready, you can plug it in, and there you go. And that is not the case. So it is, as with so much of the net zero, you know, the theory of cleaning up our environment is fine. The costs are very significant. The timetables are ridiculously short, unmanageably short, and unfortunately people haven't been told the full story.
Angela, thanks for illustrating that for us. I really appreciate that. That's Angela Knight there. She is a former Chief Executive of Energy UK. She's also a former Treasury Minister for the Conservatives, so thank you to her for that. What do you think about this? Do you think it's right that £8 billion of our money should be set aside to cover risk for the carbon capture industry? What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Well, in just a few minutes' time, we're going to talk to an MP from Northern Ireland. Her name's Carla Lockhart. You might not have heard of her, but she has been the subject of just absolutely horrendous trolling online. She's a member of Parliament, in fact, for almost, not quite, but almost the area where my parents live in, just up the road actually, a place called Upper Bann, and she is for the Democratic Unionists. But like so many different people in public life and so many different politicians, she has received absolutely horrendous abuse online. She's spoken out about it, she's been very direct about it. We're going to talk to her in just a second. Paul is in Cornwall. First of all, though, he wants to talk about two-tier justice. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to run something past you. I don't know if you're aware, in Cornwall we have something called ethnic minority status.
Oh, right, okay, yes.
Okay, so given this sentencing thing that you've been talking about, if I, in Cornwall, or anybody in Cornwall for that matter, committed a crime, found ourselves in court, and we claimed ethnic minority status as a Cornish person,
yeah,
would it apply to us, or would they say, oh no, it don't count?
I don't think this is part of it, but you could argue that. You could say you're an ethnic minority, so therefore why should you not, I mean, why should you not be able to in some way benefit from it? I think that's a perfectly fair argument. You can take this in any direction. Also, if you identify as someone who's trans, or if you identify as someone who is of an ethnic minority, well then surely you should be able to benefit from this. It's ludicrous. The whole thing's ludicrous, Paul.
Yeah, the thing is, we can identify under ethnic minority status in Cornwall. We can identify as Cornish, not English.
Well, if you get lifted for that armed robbery, Paul, maybe you should do that.
Yeah, well, I'm ex-police, so I
right. It's probably highly unlikely. Do you know what? I was actually working in Cornwall as a journalist on one occasion, and we were there one day, and then the news desk rang and said, actually, we have another story for you to cover. Can you stay overnight? And I said, well, that's fine, that's no problem. But I'm a freelance. I was a freelance journalist at the time, and I said, how does it work? Do you get another day's pay, or just a day in lieu?
No, that's an old one.
Thanks, Paul. Paul in Cornwall there, thank you very much indeed. We're going to talk, as I said, to this MP in just a second about the horrendous abuse she's had online. I really want to know what you think about it as well. 0344 499 1000. But let's hear what Carla has to say in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Carla Lockhart is a Member of Parliament you may not have heard of, but she is from the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. She represents Upper Bann. She is, I can say, I'm not a supporter of the DUP, but Carla is someone who works really hard for her constituents. I know she puts in the hours. She is a very dedicated MP in House of Commons, where there are some MPs who are very dedicated and some who aren't. I judge Carla on what she's done and what she's done for the area and how she speaks and what she says in regard to Northern Ireland. What I don't judge her on is how she looks, but a lot of people do. And that has led to a huge amount of trolling of Carla Lockhart. Well, she joins me now. And Carla, I know this is something you've spoken about before, but it came to a head this week when you tagged a rival politician, Michelle O'Neill, in a post on social media a few days ago. Can you just talk me through why you did that and what has happened since then?
Good evening, Peter. Lovely to see you again and catch up with you.
Hi there.
Look, I have been subjected to online trolling for many, many years. My social media is awash with it, and anyone that searches my name will see some of the horrendous tweets and messages that I get. On Tuesday, just before I travelled over to Westminster, I was getting a little frustrated with the fact that I believe there is an orchestrated campaign, particularly against me, and because of my strong unionist beliefs, and a lot of the accounts, the faceless accounts, Twitter accounts or X accounts, were actually followed by a senior MLA from Sinn Féin. So
this is just for people who perhaps don't know, Sinn Féin, of course, the rival party to yours in Northern Ireland. You're a unionist, they're nationalists, and you think you're being targeted for your political beliefs, but they're using your appearance as the way to attack you.
Yes, and I'm not saying they directly, but certainly that they're following the accounts that do, and that I felt needed called out, because we can talk about violence against women and digital violence against women. When you see harassment online, you shouldn't be part of it or follow those who want to participate in it. Now, I know it is very difficult to legislate for who follows you and who you follow. I have 29,000 people on my Facebook. I have many thousands on my Twitter. So, it is very difficult. But if you see someone continually abusing someone else, I think it's time to hit the unfollow button.
Can you just give me a sense on, we're totally aware that it's 6:30 on a Friday evening. Can you give me a sense of what some of the abuse is saying and how it is affecting you?
Well, I get a lot of abuse about my appearance, not about my politics, although people don't hold back on that either, but that's fine. I have no issue with someone debating or, taking into my position on specific issues. But what I don't appreciate is whenever people feel the need to comment on my appearance and how I look. For me, I don't read the comments. I try just to let it go. And to be honest, they're not annoying me. But what they don't realise is there is a family behind me. And certainly when they read and see some of the horrendous comments, it does cut deep, and it's not so nice for them, because I think people, over many years, politicians are, can be a bit of a punch bag, and that's fine. But I think it has got so personal, and they've got to be mindful that we are mums, we are daughters, we are wives, and we are real people.
And when you talk to other elected people and people who are maybe thinking about going forward to be candidates or thinking about their council elections coming up in England, for example, when you talk to people in Westminster as well, is this very widespread?
Look, it is, absolutely. You see it very much within the female side of things. If you're a woman in politics, the chances that you've been abused online is very, very high. The BBC actually recently just did a survey, I'm not sure if you've seen it, of 22 MLAs, the vast majority of which were female, who had been abused.
These are Assembly members in Northern Ireland then, yeah. So this was BBC Northern Ireland. Just remind us what they came up with at the end of that, Carla.
Well, it just demonstrated the magnitude of the issue and how big this is, and certainly on the mainland GB, I know that many female colleagues are abused on a daily basis. So for me, it's about speaking up, calling it out. I have a platform, unlike many others, to actually try and make a change. I think we need to obviously try and take on the societal change and the fact that people feel they can say anything about anyone without any repercussions online. And we also then need to take on the legislative change that's needed. We need agile laws that are able to keep up with the technology. I think, Peter, you're probably somewhere in the same age range as myself. And we don't count ourselves old, but certainly what young people know about technology is much more than we do. So we need a government that is agile enough to keep up with technology to protect our young people going forward. And we also need police forces across the United Kingdom well enough resourced with digital detectives, in truth, because of the amount of abuse that's going on.
What sanction do you think should be given to someone who abuses you online, do you think?
Well, I don't want in any way to close down speech. I want freedom of speech and all of that. But these are big tech companies. They are worth billions. One of them, one of the social media companies where, there is online abuse, made 132 billion last year. 98% of that was via advertising. Advertising from reputable companies, because that's where everyone is. I get that. But would those companies, if it was a newspaper and this type of comments were being made in newspaper print, would they advertise with that company? So I think hit these companies where it hurts, and let them see that the government is willing to put in nearly like a scours on the doors, and how you respond to online trolling and online abuse and harmful content online and the radicalisation of young boys. So I think there is much more that the government can do. It's obviously going to take significant resources, and it's going to take techie people to actually get behind this and really make a real difference. So that's the space I'm in. I felt it was necessary to call it out because we can't let it be normalised. We can't allow people to think that women in politics or in public life are fair game and that that anything can be said about them.
How do we protect our young people? I'm sure you have. I don't know if you've children, Carla, but I know you have. I'm sure there are plenty of young children in your life. How do you protect them from it and from seeing what is on there?
It is very difficult, and I think herein lies the problem, and that's why we need laws to ensure that these big techs are being responsible online and ensuring the safety of our children. A lot of it then is parental, and I was just remarking with one of my colleagues that one of the accounts that abuse me, quite often they're faceless, and there's a lot of anonymity online, which is a problem.
And do you complain about them? Do you flag them?
Oh, yeah,
too? Yeah,
absolutely. And they're rarely is the comment removed because it doesn't violate the rules, because it's maybe not illegal, but it's harmful, and in truth, because of the volume, it's harassment. But quite often now what we see, Peter, is people actually willing to put their name to it, which causes me even greater concern that we now have a society where people feel they can do that. I followed one through recently, and I'll not obviously say the name, but this was a photographer. This was someone who had a wife and 2 children and felt he could say that I needed a sledgehammer to fix my teeth, because my teeth and my appearance is always the 2 things that people will raise online. And when I challenged him, I said, look, is this the type of example you want to be to your children, that you can say this about someone online who you don't know? And It was very quickly removed when challenged. So, I think it's important that we do challenge and that we speak out. And I appreciate your interest in it and you using your platform to speak about it.
I get a wee tiny bit of it, and it's not nice, but I expect it's less than 1% of what you get, Carla. We'll keep speaking up about it. Thank you for chatting to me today. That's Carla Lockhart, who is the MP for Upper Bann. She's a Democratic Unionist MP, and she's spoken out about this. I want freedom of speech. In fact, one of the big themes of what we've talked about today is freedom of speech, and we're the home of free speech here at Talk. We're the home of common sense as well, but clearly there's a difference between free speech and abuse, and that is something that we need to be really wary of online, but wise words there from Carla Lockhart, I think. And if you've any thoughts on that, feel free to give me a call, 0344 499 1000. I'll take some calls and texts and tweets, and we will talk to you between now and 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan will be in this seat. He'll be here between 7 and 9 this evening, and then What Just Happened is on between 9 and 10. I'll be back tomorrow between 10 and 12, but plenty of discussion to be had in just a second here on Talk.
He was marching towards us, shouting, gesticulating. We didn't know what he was going to do, and the people we were speaking to were saying that these are the bad guys, essentially.
Yeah, right.
And
are there in those campsites that you witnessed there, where the people smugglers are hanging around? Are there any sort of authorities? Is there any police there, or what?
No, it was just the volunteers who were there to provide medical support or provide food. But no, I didn't see the police.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets to Wembley this summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
It is indeed, and listen, I wish you all the very best if you do enter that competition, but if you don't win, don't look back in anger. Thank you to Rob, who has been in touch on WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. He says that Carla Lockhart, the MP we just heard from, doesn't want basic freedom of speech. She wants her version of freedom of speech. Legislation to stop freedoms is not the answer. Well, Rob, I think there's somewhere in the middle that needs to be struck, especially when you're just abusing people. It's different. You're not putting your opinion across if you're saying someone needs a sledgehammer to sort out their teeth. That's just abuse. Diana says, I'm appalled to hear of the abuse that Carla Lockhart gets, but I'm sadly not surprised. And she's been in touch on Twitter and says, I'm a white, straight, working class female. What preferential treatment will I be getting in the justice system? None, I think. If this goes ahead, we may as well abandon justice in the UK. On Fiona's call earlier on, the lady who was worried about her benefits, disabled lady who's suffering from cancer and having all sorts of treatments, Alex says, please, Peter, tell Fiona not to worry. It's sad to think as a society we're frightening our most vulnerable. Great show, and yeah, we do need to tell some people they'll be fine. If you're a genuine claimant, you've nothing to worry about. And Bob says Fiona exposes the lack of communication from government, causing unnecessary stress to people who genuinely qualify for benefits. Thank you for helping this lady and her dog, says Bob. You certainly heard from the dog in the background there. Great companion for Fiona, I'm sure. Dallas says, you're the first person I've heard use the word guff for a long time. My father used it all the time. It's quite a Northern Irish word, I think. Two-tier justice is something we've been talking about all throughout the programme. We want to continue to talk about that, and welfare and mental health and whatever else you want to talk about between now and Kevin O'Sullivan coming up in about 10 minutes' time. Jack has given me a ring from Kent, 0344 499 1000. Jack, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Do you have any recollection of that case in which Cherry Blair was defending, I'm pretty sure it was a Muslim father? I can't remember the details of it, but I have a feeling it was something to do with some dispute in a post office or a bank about queuing, I think it was. No,
I don't remember the one you're referring to, I'm afraid. I know she's a very eminent barrister. In fact, she's been a part-time judge, a recorder for some time, as well as old Cherie Blair.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember how long. I think it may have been about 10 or 15 years ago, but I don't know whether Blair was in office at the time. But I remember that. So this has been going on for ages, this sort of thing. I don't know what the result of the case was.
Yeah, sort of mitigation. I mean, what do you think of it in general, basically using ethnicity or sexuality or whatever as a basis to say, well, actually, this person didn't really mean to do it?
No, I think that's obviously wrong. I mean, obviously... people's past criminal behaviour should be taken into account when sentencing, and their circumstances, I suppose. In fact, I think that may explain some of the disparities between different sentences, between different ethnic groups, because some people commit hundreds of crimes before they're sentenced, and other people, I mean, if you've committed 50 or more similar crimes before you get sentenced on, or just a couple, then obviously the sentences are going to be different.
Yeah, well, it's often the way, and I think that's the kind of thing that should be taken into account rather than anything else. And you make some very, very good point. Cherie Blair, I'm told, has defended Muslim women who cover up and insisted at the time that it is wrong to see them as a threat. This is weeks after her half-sister Lauren Booth announced her conversion to the religion. She claimed it was not true that women who covered up were oppressed and incapable of thinking for themselves. Her comments in an interview with a Spanish newspaper follow Lauren Booth's claims that the religion has given her a new sense of respect. When is that from? Do we know when that actually happened? I know it was a number of years ago that Cherie Blair made those comments. She was known as Cherie Booth, of course, using her maiden name as a barrister, and I don't know if she still practices, but we'll find out when that's from anyway. 2012. So that is... 13 years ago. Jenny is in Hampshire and has given me a ring about two-tier justice. Jenny, you're very welcome to the programme. Go ahead.
Oh, good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
I'm absolutely disgusted with all of this. It really does just makes me feel ashamed of this country now. I mean, I'm in my 70s and I've never seen anything like this. How dare these people actually stand up? They're going to encourage all the dregs of life around the globe into this country by saying, oh, go to Britain, you can commit your crime. It doesn't matter if you're a pedo, it doesn't matter if you're a rapist, it doesn't matter if you're a murderer. Your background's going to help you get a less sentence. So they'll be kind to you over there. So it's going to encourage more here. Where are these people coming from, and what right do they have? Are they running the country now?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, and I just don't know what difference it makes. If you have murdered someone, if you've raped someone, if you've committed an armed robbery, why is the fact that you're black or brown or white,
Exactly.
why does that make it any different? It's still wrong. You should still receive the same sentence that someone else who has done the same thing gets. It's so straightforward.
Exactly. So why do these people want to do this? And also, are they in charge? Are they running the country now? I mean, obviously, Starmer, he's a lawyer. He should know better. He should stamp his foot and say, no, you're not doing this.
Maybe they will. Maybe they will, Jenny. Maybe they're going to say, actually, we've got this legislation. We're going to overrule what the Sentencing Council does. But there is a wider problem here, and that's when you create a lot of these bodies, a lot of these independent groups. And I'm not saying the judiciary shouldn't be independent, but it shouldn't be able just to make up its own guidelines in regard to things that should have absolutely nothing to do with whether someone is sent to prison or not.
I just think it's so wrong that they do not. Nobody is respecting the people of this country.
Yeah.
It's as if we, if you're Indigenous now, oh gosh, you're not welcome in this country. That's how I feel.
Well, I think a lot of people feel the same way. Jenny, thanks for your thoughts on that. I want to talk a little bit more about two-tier. About this two-tier justice thing, certainly before the end of the programme. But I just want to pause for a second and talk to Derek in Solihull, who's been in touch on welfare. And welfare is a big issue that people are talking about this week because of the spring statement. Derek, go ahead and tell us your thoughts.
Hi, Derek. I'm Derek. Peter. I rang earlier on. I was listening to Fiona, and that made my sort of blood boil a little bit because we've got some friends who... she's retired on ill health, the public sector, on a really good pension.
Okay.
And she's married to her husband, who retired about 10, 15 years ago, on a really good private pension. So they're quite, reasonably well off, if you like.
Yeah.
But because she listened to a radio station, it wasn't talk, by the way, and the person said about tips and things, perhaps I can apply for that. And she did. And it was all done on the phone. There was no physical... examination. There was no means tested about how much
So despite these people you're talking about having quite a large amount of money themselves, they're still given extra benefits?
Well, so they're large, but they've got decent pensions, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Right? But because it's not means tested, that wasn't asked whether you actually need the money.
Mm-hmm.
And what made it even worse is that I'm not knocking the people because they can... it's a system to be used, but he wanted a brand new MG electric car, right? That was his wish.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford one, on their current salary.
Well, that's not the sort of thing that the taxpayer should be paying for, Derek, at all. That's not.
They've got it. They've got it now. They've had it for about a year or so.
Well, and I think a lot of people will see that, and you will see that, Derek, and other people in the area will see this and think, hold on a second, I'm a mug here. Why am I paying my taxes? Whereas people like Fiona... No doubt in my mind, from every single thing I heard from Fiona, no doubt about it, she deserves the money. She absolutely fine, no issue with that whatsoever. But people like the ones you're talking about, they're perhaps not doing the right thing.
No, and I was surprised when I actually applied for it. I really was.
Okay.
And I was even more surprised when I actually got the awarded thing.
Awarded it anyway, yeah, okay.
It should be means tested.
Derek, thanks for your thoughts. That's Derek in Solihull. Stuart's in Bradford. Stuart, you're very welcome to the programme. Go ahead.
I've got a nephew who's got in sickness benefit and PIP for ADHD and he can't concentrate.
This is your nephew, okay?
Yeah, and now they've just turned up with a new electric Mini, all thanks of the government.
Do you think he should be given these benefits?
Why should he be driving if he can't concentrate?
That's a very good point.
If you can't concentrate, which ADHD is allegedly, you shouldn't be driving as far as I'm concerned.
Has he ever worked? Has he ever had a job?
Yeah, he's had jobs when it's suited him and when he's wanted to. He's got 2 kids now to a lass who boils water and burns the bottom out of a kettle. She says she can't go out because she's agoraphobic.
I mean, you sound a bit sceptical about the things that they're saying, Stuart.
Everybody gets a bit fed up and don't want to go out, but everything I've got, I've had to work for me and my wife. We haven't been able to have kids.
Do you think it's a generational thing, Stuart? Do you think it's the younger generation?
Yeah, I really do, yeah. And I'll tell you something else as well. In 20 years' time, we're going to have a load of psychopaths running around because when COVID were on and all the masks were on, the kids haven't seen the parents' faces. You know, you talk with a face.
Yeah.
There's no personal awareness of what you're saying and what you're doing.
It's a very fair point. Stuart, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Stuart in Bradford. David is in Exeter. Let's squeeze in David before we talk to Kevin O'Sullivan. David, just about a minute. What would you like to say?
Well, we've got political policing, and the police have been downgraded over decades now. We've now got political judiciary, and we've got political justice. I think it's incorrect, really. What we've got to do, by calling it two-tier, it's not correct. What we've got to do is call this out clearly and loudly. This is political policing, political judiciary, and political justice.
Okay.
Now, this rot, frankly, started with Blair when he took out the Lord Chancellor, which was the Crown's conscience in the Lords, i.e. the principal law lord. It started then. They hand-in-glove did it when they downgraded the police, and they saw them nothing as shelf stackers. But this is something that we've got to get to grips with, because if we don't, we're going to end up with the warning that Churchill made at the end of in the 45 election, when he said, if you carry on with socialism, which is in theory and principle no different to communism, you will have political policing, and we're there now. His warning is now valid.
David, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Barry says, I feel really sorry for Carla Lockhart, the MP you had on. I went through a similar hell throughout secondary school before the advent of social media, which contributed to a significant lack of confidence, which I've carried since into adulthood, including lengthy military service. Even today, the memory of it brings me back to tears, and I'm now in my 60s. No requirement to read this out, Peter. Well, I have, Barry, and I'm happy to do so, and I'm sorry that you went through that, and it does illustrate the point very, very well. It lasts a lot longer than simply the person reading the tweet or hearing what you have to say about them. Kevin is here between 7 and 9. Hi, Kevin. What's coming up on your show?
Why is Keir Starmer in Paris obsessing on Ukraine's sovereign borders?
Are you not part of the coalition of the willing, Kevin?
But why is he in Paris obsessing on Ukraine's sovereign borders while completely ignoring Britain's sovereign borders? It's an absolute disgrace. And that nonsense in Paris won't amount to a hill of beans. There will be no coalition of the willing.
Do you think it's just posturing?
Of course it is. When push comes to shove, it'll be the coalition of the unwilling. So we will be looking into that. We'll be asking the question. Ben Habib's going to come on at 8 o'clock. I'm going to ask him why it is that Britain spends billions and billions of pounds on law-breaking foreigners, criminal foreigners who break into our country, but we don't, while taking billions of pounds away from British citizens. This country is teetering on the edge of utter insanity. I think it's unravelling fast. The story you've been doing